For well ages, the galaxy has been full of weaklings who need to be crumped. They're puny Daka, not garg enough to make a proper racket. Oomies, pansies, stunties, and other weird gits, proving there's no proper scraps happening. Only we have the guts to make a proper go of it. For today's, we is elucidating the meanest, leanest, and proper conquerors of the stars. The Greenskin Tide. The Orcs.
Of all the races I have battled throughout the galaxy, the Orc is the hardest to comprehend. They wage war with machines that should not work, care little for strategic gains, and are just as likely to slaughter each other as the enemy. How does one battle an enemy that defies all logic? The galaxy as we know it is beset by plagues, corruptions, and ancient horrors aplenty. The influence of long-perished demagogues still ravaging its many verdant worlds. Immortal tyrants, crestfallen castellans, and upstart empires waxing and waning with the passage of time. Only in rare instances is a species created with such malice that it blights the stars, irrespective of circumstance. For today, we shall elucidate the fungal menace which plagues the galaxy. A biological weapon which, despite its degeneration, has regardless remained a constant threat, which must not be underestimated. The Greenskin Tide, the Orcoid species. In order to understand these crude abominations, one must first recount what is known of their creation. The meddling of strange Xenos, unknowingly concocting a species too grotesque to be considered anything more than barbaric. More than 60 millennia ago, predating even the human species gracing the stars, nascent empires squabbled over the dominion of the galaxy. The naivety of the sickly Necrontyr, forever darkening the void with their spite. Allying themselves with the voracious star gods, the Catan, in order to wrestle dominion of the stars from the old ones of yore. To combat such a threat, the primordial reptilians sired new entities to fight in their stead. The Eldari foremost of their children, for whilst the old ones prized intelligence as the hallmark of their craft, such as was seen in the Jokero, Slann, and other similar geneses, to defeat the revivified Necron Empire, a far blunter instrument would carry out their will. Hulking monstrosities, standing as tall as 12 meters in height, cast their shadow upon their enemies. The beings known as Kroks, armed and armored with equipment far more sophisticated than can be regarded by their contemporary descendants. The so-called Brain Boy ancestors of the Gretchen, creating expendable cannon fodder which we today would regard as the Orcs. With the war in Heaven won, the Old Ones no longer needed the Krork species to maintain their dominance, implanting genetic dispositions into their lesser kin's genome to grant them insight on how to create their strange technologies. Though no record pertains to how the Brain Boys and the Krork species dwindle, it is likely that the Eldari species, gifted as they were with psychic talent, purged them from the domains to which they would inherit. Yet the lesser Orcoid species would survive. Their collective psychic imprint on reality, though unable to be properly harnessed, morphed into a gestalt, which they regard among themselves as the Great Green. Their ramshackle creations, functioning despite no worldly reasoning for them to do so. In time, certain color schemes, mantras, and ideological staples would crystallize into tangible effects merely as a result of their collective belief. Yet with the rise of the Imperium of Man, humanity would test its mettle against the Greenskin menace. Their 50 millennia of devolution, regardless providing a mass of bodies to which the Scions of the Great Crusade would purge. The single largest threat to mankind, due to the Necron slumber and Eldari's downfall following their creation of the being known as She-Who-Firsts. Only the Orcs had maintained what could loosely be designated as a star-spanning civilization. Their numbers competing with that of the amassed strength of humanity. Upon their tech fiefdom, Goro, within the Telon Reach, the Orcs fell in droves to the guns of the Emperor's mighty fleet. His most cherished son, Horus Lupercal, leading the charge to destroy Goro and rid the Orcs of their war machine's technological backbone. As the 1,000-strong Lunar Wolves descended, so too did the Master of Mankind and his greatest Primarch, the 16th Legion's first company, and a cadre of Custodian Guard facing the overwhelming hordes of Greenskins with their ruler at their spear tip. As rampaging Orcs towered over even the Dreadnought veterans, a barrage of plasma fire weakened the Emperor's own psychic defenses. An enormous Orc seizing the Master of Mankind within its grasp, Horus Lupercal did sever the beast's arm with his power blade, saving his father before slaying the creature together. Even now, Millennia removed from their former overlords of the Krorks, the Greenskins were dangerous in the extreme. The Emperor rallying his entire Great Crusade armada to confront their strongholds following the Warpfold implosion of the scrap world of Goro. Enacting the Ulanor Crusade, seeking to behead the leader of the Orc Empire, Overlord Erlak Uruk. Upon their capital world, 100,000 Space Marines of the combined Lunar Wolves, Ultramarines, White Scars and Blood Angels invaded. Supported by 8 million Imperial Army forces, 100 Titans of the Legios Ignatum, Ataras, and Griphonic, and over 600 naval ships in orbit, millions of Greenskins perished before Horus Lupercal hurled the lifeless body of Erlak from the walls of its fortress. Breaking the single largest contingent of Orcs which had coalesced in the absence of the Eldari from the galactic stage, humanity had now established itself as the true inheritors of the stars. Yet with their own downfall, opportunities for the Orcs to fester would manifest, from the War of the Beast to the devastating wars of Armageddon. The Greenskins once more mobilizing for galactic domination as part of the Great War of their prophet. To be an Orc is to be the barest example of intelligence. Their obscene musculature, quick tempers, and bloodthirsty need for violence, evidence of their inferior design as nothing more than a tool of conquest. Incapable of creative endeavor without the need to regale tales of battle, so ingrained is their need for combat that a quirk of their physique is their ability to grow larger in stature should they succeed in surviving what they would call scraps. Capable of surviving the most grievous wounds, not by dint of genetic tailoring, alike to the Astartes, but rather stubborn defiance made manifest. Even should an Orc lose crucial organs in battle, should they remain ignorant of such a fact, it is not uncommon for them to persist. Replacing hearts with close approximations of similar-looking harvests of the slain, or even surviving beheadings should a fresh body be forthcoming. Their incredible resistance to pain, disease, and other maladies beggars belief. Their regenerative abilities, allowing them to stitch body parts of other Orcs to their form without worry of genetic compatibility. The only way to truly slay these fungal atrocities is with cleansing flame, lest their spores give way to new life. Typically stockier than the average human, despite their similar heights due to their hunched bearing, Greenskin limbs are replete with taloned fingers, all the better to tear throats and eyes, should their pummeling strikes prove insufficient. Leathery of skin, pocked with benign parasites, and festooned with scar tissue, their bone density is extremely thick, especially for their skulls, which are replete with rows of sharp, jagged teeth. Feasting on their own subspecies for sustenance, among other forms of life, including humans, Orcs never stop growing should their insatiable hunger for battle remain uncontested. Though should an Orc be starved of violence, an enfeebling of their senses will ensue. Amalgamations of both terrestrial and fungal traits, allowing for their incredible adaptability. Whilst their animal cells contain information of their specific subspecies, their fungal components biosynthesize to define the Orcoid type. The algae which permeates their cells, the cause of their green complexion, the high metabolism of the Orcs allows their bodies to remain alive, long after incurring mortal wounds, enabling their painboy and mech specialists to repair their bodies. A single trace of Orcoid spores, enough to doom an entire star system to be ravaged by their cancerous influence. The survivors of each initial tribe, culled from such domains, regroup from their defeats, reproducing and adapting to have another go. Condemned to inevitable defeat, should immense measures not be taken to root out the infestation, root and stem. Should any escape a civilization, to spread word of the scrap on the surface to neighboring systems, battle-deprived Orcs shall also beset such holdouts in force. Entire swathes of the galaxy, infested with minor Orcoid empires, comprising by far the largest military power across all segmentums. Though many can be combated piecemeal when assembled into a war, their devastation knows no bounds. While I will keep the uncomfortable discussion of Orc reproduction to a minimum, what needs to be known is merely that they procreate asexually, their fungal spores growing within the soil of distant worlds, growing into forms alike to a womb. Such peculiar plant life, producing every known kind of Orcoid species. The first to be produced are squigs, which shall provide future nourishment, followed by snotlings, who will tend to cultivating such beasts of burden. Next are Gretchins, which subsist on smaller Orcoid fauna until their work to erect settlements is complete. The foundations of Orc civilization when set, allowing larger Orcs to reproduce, now benefiting from abundant food sources, labor, and materials. Trillions of spores carried on the wind, allowing their widespread and simultaneous infestation. Whilst Orcs continually drop spores in life, with the death of each and every Orc, they release millions more upon their deathbed, ensuring their legacy continues. Feral tribes, surviving within native wildlife ecosystems as they grow in number or await their kindred to descend from the skies. Many a planet has been deemed necessary of exterminatus countermeasures to ensure the destruction of such threats. The smallest of all orkoids, known as snotlings or snots by their kindred, these tiny beings are unfit for even small arms fire and are typically used as shock attack gun ammunition, serving as pets or even snacks for their merciless overlords. Sometimes carrying shards of glass or small cudgels made of scrap into battle. Strangely, such diminutive creatures lack violent tendencies and prefer to provide medicine, food, and drink to their masters. Sharing extremely close bonds with squiggly beasts which reside within orc cesspits, though many such attendants are devoured each day, it is often a preferable risk than being in the presence of their larger kind. Organized by their merciless runt herds, which use a variety of methods to achieve the obedience of bands of snotlings and gretchins, their grot pods and squighounds instill fear in their hearts, cultivating their anxieties to serve orcoid society. The next largest subspecies, known as gretchin, also known as grots, these low-cunning vermin, thought to be mature snotlings, though more numerous in number than their orc masters, are likewise to snots, unsuited to conventional warfare. Stealing anything not nailed down, or in some instances, even the things that are nailed down, gretchins prey on the weak and injured to sate their need for violence, using their sharp teeth and middling weapons. Their anatomy benefiting from large noses, ears and eyes, allowing for great senses of smell, hearing and night vision. Most champion of all virtues is their need to survive underfoot within the thick of mayhem. Evolved to have something akin to a sixth sense for danger, their use of rude gestures in the face of authority is often coupled with fawning apologies if caught, resulting in mixed success to evade consequences. Exceptionally clever, at least when compared to other orcs, their capacity for learning is used to their benefit, often when allying with specialists such as pain boys or mech boys to help aid in their ministrations. Flushed from their hovels when war calls to fight in vast mobs to overwhelm their enemies. Though no Gretchin is allowed to carry weapons which may pose serious harm to an orc, in great numbers they are capable of killing larger opponents. Prolific scavengers who loot anything they can from their fallen foes. During warding actions, Gretchins wriggle through small spaces, hoping to find useful functions to sabotage, whilst their larger kin distract their enemies with weapons fire. The common parlance to which people refer to orcs being regarded by their society as boys. Each is given an attribution which illustrates their tendencies in battle, with the most numerous of such being the Slugger Boys. Carrying semi-automatic ballistic pistols, known as sluggers, into battle, serving as heavy infantry units. When in melee range, such warriors use battle axes known as choppers, and are protected by shoddy flak armor. Each Slugger Boy mob consisting of a minimum of 10 to maximum of 30 soldiers, some are led by their equivalent officer classification known as a nob, short for noble, typically armed with either a big shooter or rocket launcher. Shooter boys, attacking from range, armed with automatic rifles of questionable accuracy. Despite their lack of melee weaponry, such orcs are content to shoot wildly, reveling in the noise they make. The majority of orc society holding the belief that ranged weaponry is only as effective as how much noise its firing can produce. Mobs of 10 to 30 shooter boys make such rackets aplenty, with 1 in 10 carrying a big shooter or rocket launcher. Stick bombers, intelligent enough to understand which part of a grenade to hurl and which to keep in one's hand. These variants of Slugger Boys, though less well armed, hurl stick bombs into entrenched enemy positions, and are usually more effective at inflicting casualties. Ard Boys, acting as the heavily armoured specialists of Orc battle doctrine. Their dense, heavy armour shrugs off small arms fire as they wield shooters, choppers, sluggers, and even stick bombs to fell their enemies. 1 in 10 armed with heavier weapons such as big shooters and rocket launchers. While most are not expected to live long, the most veteran of Ard Boys scavenge war zones for resources to repair or pay for a new suit of heavy armour. Spearheading every orc advance, and thus receiving the most punishment for their temerity. As a result of their dangerous lifestyle, many deem Ard Boys to be the most senior of lowlier battle lines of Orc doctrine. Seen by tech-averse factions such as the Snakebites as cowardly due to their use of heavy armour, though disdaining their methods, other clans such as the Batmoons and Death Skulls favour such widespread adoptions of such boys. Deemed by their kin as walking magnets due to their proclivity to draw the most fire, their pedigree causes arrogance to spread within their ranks as they laugh at injured orcs who refuse to wear protection. Burner Boys delight in spilling gouts of flame from their weapons as consummate arsonists, targeting not only enemy combatants, but also rivals' possessions to invite a reaction. Thoroughly enjoying the Bernie dance, which their victims make upon immolation, these pyromaniacs are adept at flushing enemy positions of dug-in opposition, and often leave vast destruction when they fall, due to their volatile equipment.
The following orc classifications, known by the broad term of
Odd Boys. These specialized orcs benefit from the gene coding of the Brain Boys and are ostracized from most facets of culture due to their peculiar nature and perceived threat to the norm. Pain Boys, serving as the medical class of orc society, though many receive only a cursory tutoring from their predecessor during their death knell, most grow their understanding as they progress in their calling. Known by their kin as Mad Docs, or Docs for short, while much of their work is done for them by virtue of the orcoid species' incredible regenerative qualities, many a miraculous procedure has been made by such strange surgeons. Using stabby bits to poke and prod at organs, such as the wobbler that wobbles. When all hope is lost for a definitive recovery, Pain Boys use their living subjects as experiments to learn new tricks. Working in tandem with mechs to graft bionics to their subjects, often during concussions, it is by no means rare for docs to replace functional limbs whilst leaving injured ones untouched, often to the chagrin of their patients when awakening. The most senior of all Pain Boys, known as Pain Bosses, each is protected by cyborg bodyguards made from their surgeries, the most cruel and eccentric of such surgeons, cast out from their tribes and known henceforth as Bad Docs. Many eventually crafting insane creations regarded as cyborg Mad Boys, Bad Docs, and even Mad Docs often find employment by freebooter warbands due to their desperate need for medics within the void of space. Mech Boys, also known as Mechaniacs or Mechs for short, providing engineering solutions to the Greenskins. These bizarre technicians are employed predominantly by the Speed Freaks of clans such as the Evil Sons to maintain their vehicles. Crafting warbikes, trucks, mechanized suits, and other contraptions. The most skilled of such crafts, known as Big Mechs, carry custom combi weapons of the highest quality by orc standards to protect their wares. Accompanied by junior mech boys who tend to their workshops, many are equipped with custom force fields to protect themselves from rivals and the occasional mechanical mishap. The most revered of all such artificers, known as Mech Bosses, who in turn lead their own wars. Their forces benefit from among the finest weapons and armor available, using resources pillaged from their devastation. Runt Herds, also known as slavers by their kin, corralling the Gretchen and Snotlings of their respective tribe. Their use of whips force rebellious runts into submission, and convince such unruly scoundrels to fight. Riding atop squighounds, which eat fleeing grots as a means to motivate cowardly runts. Runt Herds also oversee captured prisoners of other species, ranging from humans, Tyranids, and even Necrons on occasion. Earning a wealth of teeth for their services due to their indentured labor force, most Runt Herds invest their spoils into reliable war gear and fight alongside Gretchen war machines to best keep an eye on their underlings. Herders, acting as the cultivators of the many squig species, which often precludes them from the front lines. These caretakers of squig food supplies, hair supplies, and other outlandish uses are less prevalent within more technologically sophisticated tribes. Most bespoke odd boys, such as some boys, used to keep track of loans of teeth and what could be considered monetary transactions. Yellers meanwhile preach the glories of Gork and Mork, whilst brew boys provide catering services to their warbands. Speed freaks, addicted to the sensations provided by their cult of speed, atop buggies, trucks, and bikes. These racers, typically of the Evil Sons clan, revel in their need to outpace everything in their path. War bikers, riding one-man armored steeds, armed with twin-link big shooters and Dakka guns. Their Prometheum reserves billow thick fumes from their bike's exhaust as adrenaline courses through the rider's blood. Also carrying sluggers and choppers when riding as part of mobs of as few as 3 and as many as 12. Often senior knobs or even war bosses ride at the forefront of their assembled chargers to prove once again that Red'uns go faster. Flyboys, driven from the ranks of the warbikers due to their irrational behavior and determination to reach new thrills. Only within the skies above is their freedom enough to sate their daredevil nature. Achieving euphoria too great to be constrained upon the soil below, Flyboys commit to suicidal aeronautic maneuvers in order to dive bomb enemy positions, with many an orc deeming them to be Mad Boys in all but name. Piloting not only Deathcopters, which hover over the battlefield, providing aerial support to ground forces, their Dakka jets hunt enemy aircraft, leaving smoke trails in their wake, as torrents of their bullets fill the skies in hopes of snagging a target. Burner bomber pilots, sacrificing speed for destructive potential. Each clamps as many incendiary bombs and rockets as possible to their chassis, before raining them down upon their foe. Exhilarated by the sight of clusters of infantry burning up close and crispy, bomber pilots often return to their base of operations, having gore splattered upon their craft's undercarriage as a result of them trying to get a better look of the carnage. Blitzer bomber pilots, dropping their payloads at point-blank range, achieve through daring nosedive plunges. All laugh every step of the way, as they wait for the last moment to release their ordnance and pull away from the fallout. Youngest of the potential flyboys are known as Storm Boys, whose rebellious nature is best recognized by the ridiculous rocket packs strapped to their backs. Their raucous landings from above, honing their skill at flight whilst remaining stuck into the fight. Wild Boys, shorn from the remnants of failed orc invasions, rendering them into feral orcs. These bands of strange oddities yearn to seek out their parent worlds, hoping to galvanize their connection to orc culture above even their own need to fight. The disciplines of both docs and mechs combining to form a position known as a pig doc. These feral orcs tend to their tribe's warboar herds, which they ride into battle in deference to technological alternatives. Weird Boys, the equivalent of psychers within the greenskin ranks. Though they do not draw directly from the power of the warp, they instead harness the Gestalt collective psychic power of their respective war. Their heads exploding should they drink too deep of the power of the Great Green. Many a tribe has been severely damaged by the antics of such Weird Boys, forcing them to avoid combat whenever necessary. Dragged into combat by order of their warboss to unleash green flames and bolts of lightning to even the odds of battle, many succumb to the intoxicating allure of their abilities and are henceforth known as Warpheads. The label Mad Boys, a designation for feral orcs who have fallen beyond the recognition of even their feral kin. Particularly irrational Mad Boys are known as Nutters by their kindred and are separated from their squads. Deteriorating into squabbling lunatics, arguing with their fellows over what true orkiness is. Many unintentionally rally to fight beside Weird Boys, armed with anything as normal as a chopper, or unconventional as a bucket full of terror squirrels. Each greenskin rabble consisting of as few as a dozen to hundreds. When combined in numbers, such groups comprise a tribe of as many as millions of orcs, each led by a warlord. The absolute pinnacle of wealth, power, and martial prowess, warlords are the apex of the greenskin species, and consolidate their power using force, cunning, and obscene acts of violence. The promise of fights, loot, and opportunities to rise up the hierarchy, often coalescing into an orc war. Hundreds of thousands of greenskins converge as a warlord's reputation grows, all hoping to get a scrap of the spoils to come. Dividing their tribe into divisions of around 100 to be commanded by a warboss. Every warband varies wildly in character, though typically formed around a reliable band of orc boys at its core. Every tribe ascribing their temperament to an overarching clan which epitomizes their characteristics. As the being known as Orchimedes once said,
Thinking is for gits, but everyone's a git, so you might as well think like some other git.
While tribes constantly reform and alter their allegiances to one another, their adherence to the principles of their clan remains constant. Yet to think of orcs to be anything near uniform or following conventions is a fool's errand. Orc inclinations to their clan identity speculated to be a result of genetic factors rather than choice. While an evil son may be predisposed to adrenaline chasing, bad moons often grow teeth at an accelerated rate from their rivals. When assembling tribes into a war, infighting is always inevitable, conflicting views of rival tribes spilling into violent exchanges between one another, and even amongst their own. Loyalty to one's warboss often above that of the clan to which they ascribe. All orcs are united with the presence of a common foe, setting aside their grievances until their species is proven victorious. The meanest, strongest, and toughest orcs of the tribes rising to the position of warboss to aid their warlord's ambitions. Though such warriors earn the greatest treasures from their master's endeavors, no tribe is complete without a capable cadre of mechs, pain boys, and weird boys. The highest ranking and most war-toughened warriors of the tribe, known as meganobs, these imposing soldiers often clad themselves in mega armor to convert their form into something more akin to a bipedal tank. Exchanging bountiful quantities of teeth with mechs to purchase and maintain such equipment. Though many deride such panoplies as a source of mockery, they are nonetheless a status symbol among orc culture. The elite flash kits, often following the creed of the Bad Moons, armed with among the greatest shooters teeth can buy. These ostentatious vandals offer their services as mercenaries to myriad warbands and unleash enough Daka to make any warboss smile. Looters, on the other hand, prefer the firepower provided by rockets and energy weapons, their mobs stealing anything of value as spoils from their def guns covering fire. Nobs, the equivalent of an officer cadre of battle line orcs akin to a ruling caste. Many an example is made of smaller orcoids by such brutes in order to maintain a tenuous type of order among the rabble of greenskins. Marauding in mobs, festooning their armor with trophies from sundered foes, only the strongest ascend through the ranks to more powerful positions, and thus Knobs are constantly seeking out new opportunities to test their mettle. Commandos, among the strangest of the hierarchy due to their cunning nature. Their invaluable tactics of orc maneuvers do little to impress their peers, yet such infiltrators are nonetheless a boon to any tribe who benefits from their expertise. Tankbusters, in contrast, earn great respect for felling colossal war engines using rockets and tankbuster bombs, their trophies taken from armored vehicles proudly displayed for all to see, with internal mechanisms often worn as jewelry and the flayed skin of tank crews used alike to pelt adornments. Gorkanauts, epitomizing the brutality of Gork made manifest, these hulking warsuits brimming with Dakka, though not of particularly high rank in orc society, are regardless a particularly brutal calling for the most violent of greenskins. Morkanauts, on the other hand, are a more bespoke creation, developed by mech boys to carry strange armaments, such as energy weapons. They're typically outcast pilots, sometimes known as bad mechs, often targeting their own tribe settlement to test their firepower. Death Dreads, the closest approximation to an Imperial dreadnought. These metal monstrosities wade into battle to vent their frustrations, living as they are within their uncomfortable and claustrophobic environment. Killer Khans, the grot equivalent of a Death Dread, and thus even lowlier in standing among the hierarchy, though the pilot inside would ordinarily be a nuisance of an opponent at best. Now wrapped within a chassis of steel, their capacity for violence is greatly increased. The orc equivalent of god machines, Gargants, created by big mechs, as visions from Gork or Mork fill their psyches. Such constructions cause rival big mechs to create their own, better versions, which causes a chain reaction, often as a sign of an impending war. The smaller variants of Gargants, known as Stompers, acting as icons made in praise of the orc gods. Each can carry a mob of orcs within its construction, as its death cannon and super gattlers pave the way for their advance. As the single most dominant species in existence to this day, one might ask what the objective is for such savage brutes, yet the simple answer is, might makes right. Orc philosophy, adapted from the single fulcrum of understanding. In the eyes of the greenskin, all weakness must be purged, so that only the strongest shall survive to one day be beaten by an even mightier foe. Barbaric in the extreme, as a result of this single tenet which all orcs uphold as their champion virtue. No enemy is too great to face, as their own self-assuredness is nothing short of delusional. Incapable of forming stable bodies of governance, creating great works of art, or bettering the standards of their society beyond that of the individual. These beasts, were they not constantly fighting one another, would hold uncontested total dominion of the stars. Free from the neuroticism which other species suffer, seeking out purpose or value in a careless galaxy, the orc benefits from an almost commendable ethos of never giving up and always attempting another struggle for success. Issuing doubt for ignorant certainty of their cause, so long as another being is ready for a scrap, the orcs are in their element. Qualms such as the sanctity of life or progress of a collective species beyond their small minds. Seeking wealth only as a means to make themselves stronger as individuals. To be orky is to be the largest, toughest, and meanest of all rivals, with most orcs following the tenets of Gork, rather than his cunning alternative, Mork. The savagery of the greenskin, coalescing into wars which unite their people into a single purpose. Without the sustenance of battle, such vast armies cannot sustain themselves, and thus wars target the most heavily defended outposts they can. Orc populations migrating from their birth planet once critical mass has been achieved. Their ingrained need to spread like a cancer is bolstered with the collective psychic field, which all greenskins generate. Bigger is always better, and as an orc society grows, so too does their intelligence and psychic pull to assimilate more warriors into their war. The pinnacle of their existence, achieved with such parodies of a crusade, requiring incredible might to repel. Each victory emboldened by their rampage as they seek stronger enemies to defeat. Only once no foe remains will the orcs once more turn against themselves, bringing to ruin everything their conquests have achieved. The motive force which drives the greenskins, so potent that most of their weaponry cannot be fired by non-orcoid hands, somewhat alike to the Omnissian Creed. The reflections in the warp of their primitive beliefs manifest in bizarre ways aplenty. Resurgence of immaterial phenomena galvanizing the gods of chaos with the birth of the Great Rift. To contest such a shift in galactic power, Gork and Mork are said to call their followers for a final war to join the eternal conflict. Their empire, spanning the length and breadth of the galaxy, as trillions upon trillions of spores infect new star systems with each passing day. The rallying cry of the prophet of Gork and Mork, promising a war to end all wars under its banner. For the greenskin tide never ends, but rather recedes. And in the era Indomitus, all can see plainly that the orcs are mobilizing in far greater numbers than ever seen before, and with a marked escalation in aggression, even for orc standards. The incursions of warp storms seemingly feeding their collective psychic resonance, which leads to new warbands emerging across all 5 segmentums. Weird Boy sightings have also exponentially increased. Perhaps if the Xenos races combine their efforts with the Imperium, this blight upon the stars might once and for all be purged, but such a notion is a fantasy. For the reality of the Greenskins is that they shall always blight the stars, and all that can be done is excise their larger numbers. The orcs are the pinnacle of creation. For them, the great struggle is won. They have evolved a society which knows no stress or angst. Who are we to judge them? We Eldari who have failed, or the humans on the road to ruin in their turn? And why? Because we sought answers to questions that an orc wouldn't even bother to ask. We see a culture that is strong, and despise it as crude.
Gork and Mork is the toughest, orkiest, meanest bosses in the universe. Fathers of all wars, Met Boys, Oida clans build Ooge Stompers and Gargans to show off the Umis and other gits who's the toughest bosses ever. Gork is brutal but cunning, and Mork is, cunning but brutal. If that glittery Umi boss ever had Dakka with Gork and Mork, Gork would smash his head in with a club, and Mork knees him in the gut. The Ponzi think their gods is made of that Immaterium gubbins, and so is Orc and Mork. I don't know about that. All I needs to know is Gork and Mork is well orky. Even if the other gods put on a good Dakka, Gork and Mork will keep coming back for more. And if you want to be mega hard, you need to deserve favour with Gork and Mork. Just look at Gazgulmak Uruk Fraka. He's proper orky, and he's the prophet of Gork and Mork. Nuff said. Given know-how on how to make the best wars, Fraka one day is gonna wipe out the Umis and other gits from, well, everything. And it's all because of Gork and Mork. The Bad Moons is the most teethy of the orc clans. Their teeth grow so quick, even the most grotty orc of the clan can make enough nosh. Thing is, if you're well smart and bump into a Garganoth orc, he'll knock your teeth out and keep them to himself. Some bosses keep a bunch of gobby Bad Moons around for his thugs to give him more naz. Bad Moons are well good at being rip-offs and show off wearing necklaces made of teeth and having their grots carry flashy banners. I don't like Bad Moons because they're not very orky. They're like standing really far away and making crump with their snaz guns while their Gretchens do all the Dakka up close. So quick as their teeth grow in, you'd think they'd share some of their nosh around, but they're tight gits. They spend all their teeth on shiny stuff and prance around like knobs. Some of us reckon Bad Moons are what made teeth so naz in the first place, but I don't care, so long as I can knock some out to buy a new chopper. Bad Moons is well orky at telling how much stuff is worth. Even though gold is naff, Bad Moons can't get enough of the stuff, so they like ripping off orcs as much as they can get to put in their gobs. Bad Moons have loads of orky Dakka, but they're not as good at Dakka as other knobs and bosses. One time, I sees a Bad Moon carrying a big box of teeth and a shiny gold flash, only for a bad goth to gore him up proper and take all his teeth. But the orkiest Bad Moon bosses are called Flash Gits. They're well shiny and love crumping shooters. There's a few types of Bad Moons, like the Split Grins, who have lots of teeth but keep it to themselves. Still, Bad Moons can zog off because they're naff and not orky enough. The Blood Axes are the sneakiest orc clan. So sneaky, they even work with the Umis from time to time. Everyone hates the Blood Axes because you can't trust them. You turn your back and you'll get gored. Back in tough times, the Blood Axes were mega gog, but then they started chatting to the Umis, Pansies, and even Stunties. Well, orcs don't like sneaky gits, so we had the big party and made them run off. I heard they get teeth from the Umis so they can survive, which is well pathetic and not orky. My mate Gumsnot even told me the Umis snatched the teeth from dead orcs after a Dakka, which is an appropriation. They took orc teeth when it's our job to take them. These scum do Dakka as villains across the warp and rip off instead of do any Dakka. I've heard some of them are freebooters and mob other clans. They like using tactics and other stupid things to Daka, which is rubbish because it's not orky. Their bosses like making mobs and do lots of snicks and wazza. I know about the Storm Boys, where young orcs go to grow up a bit and learn to crump. They like to use rocket packs, like some of them beakies, so they can go up close. If they get bigger, they become commandos, who they reckon is touched by Mork. But you don't touch Mork, because he lives in warp, stupid. They love cunning, but ain't got no brutal to go with it, so they're rubbish. Every cunning plan they make, they don't use even much crump, always sneaking around being quiet like them pansies. They paint their dirt with camouflage and try not to be seen, which is the most unorky thing I've ever heard. They like hiding behind rocks and stuff, but they're really hard to see, even if their camouflage is rubbish, because they reckon Mork thinks they're orky. But they like to nosh them Umi badges and stuff because they think they're Garg. Anyway, Blood Axes aren't orky, and they're rubbish. The Death Skulls is the worst clan of all the orc clans. They make themselves gits to all orcs because they can't help looting nosh and scrounging for teeth. They're massive thieves and can't help nicking things from everyone. If they think something's too much of a rip-off, they just take it. If you leave anything unattended, they'll nick it and gore you for telling them off. They're even more naff than the Blood Axes. They're really naff at working in groups or with other clans, because no one trusts them, even among themselves. They're real savvy with their weird gubbins they find, but they never have time to get better at it, because they're all too busy stealing. Massive orders, they make loads of nosh, but ain't keen on trading it. I asked the Death Skull, Filchmunch, the other day, why he has so many shooters, when he can only shoot one at a time. He said, I have loads because they might come in handy later. Ha! Joke's on him. I found where he was hiding them and nicked them from my boys to use for our own Daka. Gored him up with his own Umi Ripper that he found. Serves him right. I let him borrow some Naz a while back to buy himself a new hat, and he ripped me off. They might be quick at doing Daka, but they rush their wars so they can take all the loot. They strip Umi stompers, stunty armor, pansy nail clippers, anything else not nailed down. Death Skulls even scalp kits, and at times have at their skulls too. Even though everyone hates them, Death Skulls are mega orky at defending their nosh. Well, except for Filchmunch. Death Skulls love mechs and always tinker with the gubbins from their loot. They even use Umi mechs with their own trucks and battle wagons for Daka, even the ones named after that Umi Primarch, the airy one. Death Skulls mark their stuff with the blue because they reckon it gets Gork and Mort to defend them. They're well superstitious and put loads of weird squigglies on their armor. Thing is, they're well lucky, so some orcs reckon painting their stuff blue and wearing weird stuff is orky. Cause lots of mech boys come from the Death Skulls, so they have loads of combi shooters and their Gretchens is well clever. Still, they may be morky, but they're well odd and not as orky as proper orcs. The Evil Sons is the speediest, crumpiest of all the orc clans. Red Uns go faster, and the Evil Sons notice the best of all the orcs. They love war bikes, war buggies, and trucks to do Daka. Evil Sons have the most mech boys of all the clans to tune their mechs. Full of speed freaks and flyboys, the Evil Sons do Daka purely for the thrill of being speedy. They're mega orky at driving and flying mechs. I've seen them going through git so fast, I had to blink loads to make sure I was not seeing things. Mega good at guerrilla tactics, they're like a better version of them beakies with the weird goat trees. Well into that cult of speed, the Evil Sons are the most daring orc pilots ever. Saving all their teeth so they can trade them for bigger and faster mechs. The Evil Sons paint everything the reddest they can to make them even speedier. Sometimes with the gore of gits. I heard they call themselves the Evil Sons because what the slag Umis call Ulanor used to have a big son that was dying, which the tough orcs used to offer gore to keep it alive. Bite Boys is well faster than anything them Umis can drive, and their Daka guns rip the beakies a new one. So fast is the bite boys, they kick up clouds of smoke that's so thick it protects them from shooters. I respect Evil Sons cause they're well orky, cause they charge straight at the guts of the gits they're doing Dakka with. All in all, they fight with plenty of crump, and they is well orky. The freebooters is orcs who live on the fringes of warp. They're all bandits and mercs who don't follow any clans. Made up of all sorts of orc mobs, each freebooter warband is all villains. Almost as untrustworthy as the Death Skulls, most of the freebooters come from orc tribes that have been smashed to bits and no longer orky enough to survive. Hired as thugs for other orc clans and wars, most freebooters can be paid for with teeth and nosh to get them to gore up gits. Giving up their former clan gear, freebooters are well individualistic in how they dress. They come up with their own flash, but most of what the Umis call the jolly orc skull crossbones on their cruisers. Freebooters don't have any pain boys or mech boys at hand, so they have less and weirder looking bionics. That's why they always have peggy legs and eye patches. Freebooters call their bosses captains, who love big hats and coats to hide their shooters and choppers. They nosh for big cruisers, shooters, mechs and Nas. They're greed almost as mega as the Bad Moons, and stealing habits almost as naff as the Death Skulls, but at least they have more Dakka than both. Freebooters stuff their cruisers to the brim with thugs, so they're well hard to board. Charging directly to the gits in their way, freebooters smash through anything smaller than their own elks and nick anything not tied down. Sometimes a captain will nosh entire planets full of gits and rip off the nosh they take. They even lay traps for the slag's defenders to come and get crumped, which helps them take even more Nas. Warp is mega full of freebooters, but they don't work together, so they don't stay still for long. Led by outcast bosses and flash gits, they lead ragtag mobs of things, bug eyes, and even orcs who follow them chaos cogs. Overall, freebooters is kinda orky, but you can't trust them to do anything but rip you off and gore you for good measure, so they're naff. The Goths is the best orc clan in all the warp, period. There's no bigger, meaner, tougher or better clan in all orc culture. We're mega brutal and cunning, and we don't take any rubbish from no one. We can gore anyone up close, and if you hide behind rocks or something, we'll lob a stick bomb up your backside. Gork and Mork make only the orkiest of orcs into living gargs, and we're led by Gazgul Mag Uruk Frakker, the prophet of Gork and Mork. If that's not reason enough, then you can zog off. We've done the most Dakka, the most scrumping, and gored the most gits in the warp. Slag shakes under our boots, and we have the best shooters, choppers, mechs, thugs, and bosses. We tell all the other clans what to do, cause we're orkier than all of them. And if they don't like it, they can try and stop us, but they're too naff to beat us at Dakka. We got bigger muscles, bigger brains, bigger mobs, and bigger wars than anyone. We don't sneak, we don't hide, and all we needs is a slugger to off Umis, pansies, bug eyes, and any other gits in our way. We don't care about flash or Nas, just crumping, and our choppers are the sharpest. Our blitz boys are slower than the Evil Sons, but they're way orkier at Dakka. Our dread mobs are well hard and full of killer cans and death dreads to smash anything under their treads. I always says, only good Gretchen is a dead one, but the ones that pilot the killer cans is alright. Our blitz brigades charge into git mobs and make loads of crump, while our tank busters break the gubbins of the Umi mechs as our looters mow down any gits left standing. Our storm boys use their rocket packs to swoop in on gits and chop them up proper up close. The best storm boys get to be in Warboss Zagstruck's Vulture squad and do the orkiest gore for the Goths. The Goth Guard is made up of the veteran Goths, and most is from Frakker's slag of Urk. Doing Dakka alongside the prophet of Gork and Mork, there is no better place to do Dakka than with the Goth Guard. And last, Ugrak's Uglies is the tough core of Thraka's War. Wearing mega armor, the Uglies are the first to lead Dakas from the front and go up anything stupid enough to try and gore them. Cause we're brutal and cunning, we use them teleporters to chop up gits mega quick and leave no time not doing Daka. We wears black armor cause we ain't poncy clans like the Bad Moons and don't need to show off how orky we is. We don't wear no paints or tattoo ourselves cause it ain't orky. All you needs to know is we're the greenest greenskins there ever was, and if you don't think so, we'll gut ya. The Snakebites are the best squig tamers and grotlashes in all the clans. They're so orky at making squigs, they're the only clan what can breed squig-offs, which is just about one of the most orky things there is. Snakebites is like a tough pair of boots. They're tough, weathered, and smell really zogging bad. Full of feral orcs, the Snakebites is well behind when it comes to using mechs and normal orc stuff. All the Snakebites get bit by a poisonous snake when they're young, so they can suck the poison out to prove they're orky, which is why they's called the Snakebites. 'Cause of this, they're mega orky at not dying to poisons and stuff, and keep mobs of venomy pets. I hear they even take their poison pets to other worlds to get to eat anything less venomy and keep anything that survives. Even though they're fairly orky, they don't use shooters or most choppers like the rest of us, but they like using sharp bones and stick as weapons. They cake themselves in mud and paint before a good Daka and wear weird trophies of dead beasts they crumped. Mega close to wild stuff, the Snakebites wander the warp and don't sit still for too long. There's a few tribes in the clan, but the most deadly is the Worm Killers. They earned their name killing the Tyrannid Bug-Eyes and the Ghoul Stars when all other clans got snicked. Noshing the Bug-Eyes' claws to use as choppers, they even captured a bunch of them to infest other slags so they can continue to hunt them. Wearing brown and yellow and tattooed in red snakes on their skins, they also breed loads of hair squigs to use for making their hair all spiky. They also wear lots of wolf bites like them hairy beakies, and sometimes wear belts that are actually living snakes around their waist. Snakebites are very orky, but they're also mega weird and primitive, but you can't say they don't Daka well. Squigs are the most basic form of orcoid life. Known also as squiggly beasts, no orc can survive without these beasts of burden, using them for food, herding, medical, and other duties. Feeding on the dumps of orcs and gretchens, as well as any animals, plants, or gits too stupid to test their appetite. The smallest of all orcoids, the snotlings, make sure they're not loose, causing mayhem. Every squig, edible for the orcoids, possibly intentionally by the design of the brain boys of old. The gretchens cook them up proper, but if it takes too long, the bigger orcs chew them raw. The juiciest of all squigs, made into the most well-prepared meals there is. Those square blobs with no limbs called eating squigs are the most common food source. Their round eyes and puffy faces look proper gormless as they're feasted on. Attack squigs, bred to have a bunch of claws, teeth and horns to help gore their prey. Many war bosses keep them as pets, so they have a proper orky mean streak. Bag squigs, basically just a stomach with eyes. When dried out, they can be made into floss or tanned to make into belt pouches. Bile squigs, vomiting corrosive fluids making them perfect for use as ammo in squig launchers and rocket truck squig buddies. Their slime can be ignited, much to the delight of orcs, when used to set fire to gits. Bitey squigs, bitey. Their massive jaws full of teeth can also be used as launcher ammo, causing mayhem when fired into groups. Bomb squigs, strapped with stick bomb explosives, gleefully clenching lit fuses in their gobs. Orc tank busters whip them into charges to target armored vehicles. Boom squigs, biologically explosive with the tendency to explode as a defense mechanism. Anything from a loud noise to its own gut rumbles cause detonations, making them ideal for launchers, or as landmines with the stick squigs variant, loaded into rocket truck squig buggies as an alternative to proper stick bombs. Buzzer squigs, stored in pots and fired from squig catapults. When the pots shatter, swarms burrow into the flesh of their prey, often deprived of food for weeks on end. Buzzing squigs, seeking out skin to bore into with their proboscis. Similar to buzzers, these insects gather in swarms and are fired from catapults. Colossal squigs, the largest known variant, guard squigs, also known as squig hounds on the other hand, protect freebooter captains from harm. Face eater squigs, also known as gnasher squigs, eat faces, innit? Their aggressive tendencies, perfect for face eating contests, but when resting, are easily mistaken for eating squigs. Flesh eater squigs, well, eat flesh. These massive get shedding all the time to replace their teeth, making them a living bank lining the pockets of knobs who have them for years on end. Gob squigs, put in aught mouths to help clean their teeth and any food clinging to them. Air squigs also benefit from orc physiology by clamping onto their scalps and parasitingly feeding off them. Airy squigs, used by pain boys to seal wounds by sticking them in and pulling off their tails. When stuck, these things feed off the patient's blood, preventing infections and falling off once sealed. Urge squigs, kept by runters to keep their runts in line. These speedy gets root out snots who hide about and can track runaways for days. Mimic squigs, looking a bit like them oomy animals called parrots, love to perch on the shoulders of freebooters and odd boys, telling everyone to sog off using its speech skills. Oily squigs, used by mechs to fuel warbikes, trucks and loads of vehicles. Their trunks squeeze out the stuff from their bellies directly into the fuel tanks. Paint squigs, plopping out war paints from, well, the Gretchens take the paints to decorate banners, vehicles and shooters, using the squig's hair as a paintbrush. Parasite hunting squigs, used to hunt down anything hiding across an orc's body, an handful sprinkled on catch lice, leeches and anything else that crawls, plumping them up ready as a juicy treat once their work is done. Sparky squigs, shooting their spines at anything that threatens them. Because of their spines being poisonous, sometimes mechs make bionic arms to cage them into so they can be used as a weapon. Sploding squigs, splattering their juicy stomach insides when shaken. Many an orc force feeds them scrap to bursting before lobbing them as grenades. Squidgeons, used to send messages between tribes when other methods aren't about. Squig hounds, also known as growlers, are kinda like attack squigs and help keep the Gretchens organised. Squigosaurs are massive beasts what beast snaggers ride, the snakebites favouring them over mechanical vehicles due to their hatred of tech, while squig pipes are well horrid sounding instruments which orcs tug at under their arms to squeeze to make a racket. Squigos, absolutely zogging enormous and used as a beast of burden. Depending on the feed used by their breeders, they can grow to sizes which rival even stompers, the Orcosaurus squigs being the largest possible breed. The swab squigs, used by the pain boys to mop up gunk caused by their surgeries. Syringe squigs inject the orc equivalent of an aesthetic made from their venom, and vampire squigs suck bad blood and pus from septic wounds. While targeting squids used by the flashkids help aim their dagger, weird squigs related to the gnasher squigs are used as psychic bombs, releasing telepathic energy everywhere. Lesser known variants such as the bowel torrent squigs, burner squigs, chewing squigs, gas squigs, horn squigs, screech squigs, squid orcs, squig hogs, squig sharks and vaccine squigs also about. Nobody knows the full extent of how many types have ever been made. Where there's orcs, there's squigs, and whether they're used as eating, accessories, or just pets, not even the Gargus or Warboss would survive without them. The great green hands themselves have guided us here. You can join the WOG or get out of the way.
Humanity within the era Indomitus stands upon a knife's edge. Our enemies are countless, and their heresies boundless. Yet for each faction that opposes his Imperium, there is a war leader at their helm. The most hated foes of humanity, these enemies must be crushed before his Imperium can ascend once more as the rulers of the galaxy. So today, we shall elucidate the greatest green-skin threat that humanity faces in the tumultuous 41st millennium. The Orc war boss, Ghazghkull Mag Uruk Thraka. Before his ascension as the overlord of the greenskin hordes, Ghazghkull began his toil on the backwater planet of Urk. Abundant with vast populations of orcs, the planet once known as Eurocleus within the Zornian system would bear proximity to strong warp storms. Rich in minerals, the planet would first be colonized by the Imperium during the Dark Age of technology. Drawn by its burgeoning infrastructure, the orcs would raise the bustling human colony to its foundations, and as the initial orc raiders would abandon the now pillaged planet, they would leave spores to lie dormant within its soil. Once more colonized by the Eldari, the planet would spill forth its orc spores, and once again, the cycle of destruction, abandonment, and rebuilding would begin. Reclaimed by the Dark Angels Legion during the Great Crusade, Eurocleus would once again be mined for resources, and spaceports would be tethered to the planet's twin moons. Yet with the War of the Beast, an Orc war would sweep across the planet, and once more the spores of the orcs would grow upon its surface. The tides of the warp would twist and convulse, making travel to the Zornian system difficult, with the greenskins upon its surface stagnating and fighting amongst themselves on the desolate planet. Renamed Urk, the planet would be embroiled with never-ending slaughter by the orcs. Scavenging for scraps of human technologies left upon the broken hives and landscapes, the orc warbands would dwindle in might as leaders fell and scraps became more precious. Yet within this turmoil, the orc known as Ghazghkull Mag Uruk Thraka would emerge. Monitoring the planet within the sector's watchposts, the Emperor's Dark Angels would observe the Orc planet for signs of an impending war within the system. During 932.M41, observations of an upstart greenskin of the Goth clan would be relayed to the chapter of the Lion. Thraka had led his small warband to assault a Space Marine command sanctum with the intent of pillaging the base's resources. Thraka would be shot by a bolter shell, pulverizing a portion of his cranium, and with its detonation, disintegrating and shredding chunks of his brain. Against such a crippling blow, Thraka would return to his feet and resume his charge. Holding bits of the remnants of his spilling brains within his hands, Thraka would be treated at the outpost of Rustspike by the infamous Orc pain boy, Mad Doc Grotznik. Successfully operating on the remains of Thraka's ruined brain, Ghazghkull would awaken with a renewed sense of clarity. His skull rebuilt with wires, sinews, rivets, a new bionic eye, and plates of adamantium, Ghazghkull would be bestowed a vision by his piggish gods. Thraka would see himself leading the greatest war in history, with the blessing of Gork and Mork. Believing his providence as proof that he had been chosen, Thraka would present himself as the living embodiment of the will of Gork and Mork. Upon leaving Painboy Grotznik's tent, Thraka would be confronted by the Death Skull's warlord, Dregmek. Firing his combi bolter at the dazed yet walking Thraka, the detonations of his weapon would not harm Ghazghkull, despite the true aim of Dregmek. Thraka would pummel warlord Dregmek and end him with a headbutt of his newly plated skull. Declaring himself to be the living will of Gork and Mork, the orcs of the encampment would set upon the Goth usurper. With no more than a scratch of damage, Thraka would decimate the would-be attackers within the hour and claim Rustspike as its new ruler. The prophet of Gork and Mork had staked his claim, and soon his power would grow exponentially. Ghazghkull would set upon the orc warbands of Urk, defeating any whom would challenge his claim and incorporating the defeated clans into his ranks. As his reputation grew, orcs would abandon their own clans unprompted and venture to Rustspike to join a clan that showed the promise of untold glories. As Rustspike exceeded its capabilities to contain the vast hordes of orcs within, Thraka would lead his warband west to the Big Wasteland. Confronted by the Bad Moons clan and their leader, war boss Snazdaka, Fracker's forces would be harried by moving skirmishes of overwhelming firepower and speed. Utilizing his own cunning to outmaneuver the Bad Moons, Fracker would sabotage the Bad Moon supply dumps used to refuel their battle wagons and burn their shantytowns to the ground. Using the smoke of the burning towns, Fracker would conceal his forces and strike once within reach of their prey. With the Bad Moons conquered, Fracker would race the Evil Sun Grand Speed boss, Shazfrag, for control of his clan. Outracing the fastest orc of Urk, Fracker would prove to the orcs that none could defeat him in any field of war, tactics, or skill. Fashioning an immense power claw from the wreckages of the defeated Bad Moons tanks, Fracker would now not only be an imposing warlord in his own right, but command the largest warband of Urk. Crushing any whom defied his rule, Fracker would soon unite every tribe and hold dominion of Urk. After 6 years of subjugation, Urk now stood united under the banner of Ghazghul. Ships would flock to the planet with tidings of the warlord of Urk passing amongst the stars. The various mechs of the clans would forge in unison, crafting battle fortresses, weapons, and engines of calamity never before seen. Driven by the words and visions of Fracker, the Greenskins' purpose had been elucidated and their destiny lay outstretched and ripe for the taking. The system's sun began to flicker. The orcs would stand idle as they looked to the celestial body in shock. Yet Fracker would divine the sun's rays as a sign from Gork and Mork and demand that their time had come to leave Urk behind. Suddenly, tinted with a bright green light, Fracker's divinity would be laid bare for all to see. Within a week, the orcs would compile their vast stockpiles of weapons and armaments, the warp would calm, and spill forth a vast space hulk into real space, which would slowly drift into Urk's orbit. The exodus of the War of Ghazghul had dawned and been paved with the patronage of Gork and Mork. Securing the space hulk, Fracker and his orcs would cleanse the hulk of the denizens within, the demons of chaos. Dubbing the hulk as World Killer, the space hulk would be drawn back into the warp, and for untold days, weeks, perhaps even years within the time-mangled Immaterium, the orcs would explore their new abode. Salvaging lost technologies from within, the orcs would once again create strange and potent contraptions. Yet despite many incursions of demonic entities, World Killer would once more be spat into real space from the roiling tides of the warp. During 941.M41, World Killer would emerge at the edge of an Imperium star system, the Armageddon Sector. Set for a collision course with the system's core planet, Fracker would unwittingly initiate the Second War for Armageddon. Crash landing on the planet's surface, the Imperium's orbital defenses would merely scrape and dent the vast space hulk as it plummeted into orbit. The world shook with the impact, its blast wave killing scores of the orcs instantly, and the devastation wrought on the surface would be immense. Yet once again, Gork and Mork would smile upon the Greenskins, as their losses would be inconsequential compared to their total might. Assaulting Armageddon Prime, the inhabitants of the planet would be woefully underprepared for their surprise invasion. They now stood against the mightiest orc war seen in history, which had descended from the skies without warning and seemingly from nowhere. The War of Ghazghul would decimate the Imperium defenders. Millions of orcs would cleave through the Astra Militarum regiments as desperate calls for aid would be transmit to any nearby Imperium forces. Fracker would conquer Hive Volcanus and subsequently every hive within Armageddon Prime. Setting their sights on Armageddon Secundus, the orcs would march with the invigoration of conquest burning within them. Yet within this second bastion of humanity, Fracker would meet a foe whom would prove to be his ultimate nemesis, Commissar of the Armageddon Steel Legion, Sebastian Yarrick. Defending Hades' Hive, despite the failures and interference of the planetary governor, Hermann von Straub, Sebastian Yarrick would strike fear within the Orc ranks. Revered for his fighting skills and inadvertently bearing the same colors as the Goth clan, Commissar Yarrick would prove to be an indomitable foe to whom even Ghazghkull Mag Uruk Fracka could not underestimate. Brandishing an Orc power claw upon his severed arm, Old Baelai would defend Hades' hive with stubbornness and unyielding fury. As both Hades and Hellsreach hive stood unbroken, Fracka would be forced to take to the field personally in order to break his enemies. Employing many cunning and brutal strategies, Fracka's tactics would succeed in breaching the walls of Hive Hellsreach, yet Hades would stand defiant. Outmaneuvered at every turn by Yarrick, the Commissar would buy the Hive time until reinforcements could arrive to the system. With the arrival of the Blood Angels, Ultramarines and Salamander's chapters to Armageddon, Fracka would be driven back. Stubbornly ignoring the reinforcements in order to decimate Hades' hive, Fracka's obsession to best Yarrick would prove the downfall of his campaign. Ghazghkull would seemingly disappear, with some greenskins claiming him to be personally rescued by the hands of Gork and Mork. Whatever the cause of his withdrawal, Fracka's war would retreat, and so the second war for Armageddon would be won in the name of the Emperor. Yet Ghazghkull would not relent in his quest to claim the once homeworld of Ulanor from the grasp of the Imperium, for this would not be the last time the Prophet of Gork and Mork would attempt to seize Armageddon. Despite the efforts of Sebastian Yarrick to hunt down and slay Ghazghkull, the Prophet of Gork and Mork would rebuild his war, starting within the Golgotha subsector. Subjugating the Orc warbands within the Greenskin-held system, Fracka would once again amass a war of incredible power with immense speed. Yet humanity would not stand idle as Fracka would amass his forces. Yarrick, in his attempt to hunt down and slay Ghazghkull, would be captured and tormented amongst the slaves taken by the Orcs. Releasing Yarrick after observing his defiant attempt to escape the Space Hulk, Fracka would warn Yarrick that soon the War of Ghazghkull would once again assault Armageddon, and Fracka wanted them to be ready. Raiding Imperium strongholds across the Ultima Segmentum, Ghazghkull would experiment with his technologies and prevent his war from growing too strong. Limiting his potentially gargantuan army, Fracka would instead train his lieutenants in order to improve their already vast experience. Yet 75 years after his initial invasion, Ghazghkull Mag Uruk Fracka would initiate the Third War for Armageddon. Destroying Hades' hive, the symbol of his prior defeat, the War of Ghazghkull would then seek to blunt the defenders of Hive's Tempestora, Tartarus, and Armageddon. Utilizing asteroid bombardments, teleporting technologies, and overwhelming force, Ghazghkull would once again come close to destroying the bastion of the Imperium. Billions on both sides of the war would perish, and Orc fighting would spread throughout the sector. Yet Fracka would eventually be pushed back from the sector. Ghazghkull had been forewarned by his patron gods that a greater war would soon be on the horizon. Armageddon had simply been a staging ground, a test for their prophet to hone his tactics, knowledge, and experience to better grow his understanding of how to cripple humanity. Giving in to his impending vision as the war energies within his skull seemed close to bursting, Fracka would envision the final Great War. Every Orc of the galaxy united in their final clash against existence and their gambit to destroy everything that would oppose them. Ragnarok, the great Orc apocalypse, would soon be at hand and bring forth the manifestations of Gork and Mork into the material universe. Assembling a vast fleet, Fracka would venture to the Octarius sector to further train his war in vast, brutal conflicts against the Tyranid menace, Hive Fleet Leviathan. Octaria would be bathed in the blood of the Tyranid Xenos, as Fracka's war would aid the Octarian Orcs, currently deadlocked in the conflict. Taking to the field personally, Fracka would engage the Tyranids and lead the Orcs in their endless battle. With the Orcs emboldened, Fracka would leave the Octarius warzone to enable further Orc warfare to spill across the galaxy. leading his fleet comprised of over 5 million warships. Not even his beheading by the space wolf Ragnar Blackmane would be enough to end his rampage. Thanks to the aid of Mad Dog Grotznik, Ghazghkul's head would be attached to an even mightier body as he leads his final great war to their ultimate goal. With the Orc Xenos frenzied across several theaters of war across the galaxy, Ragnarok draws close with Thraka as the herald of the death knell of every empire. The Orcs are once again mustered to conquer the galaxy. And this time, more than any time in humanity's history, all hope to prevent their conquest is dangerously scarce.
It's Warlord Ghazghkul Mag Uruk Thraka, and I speak with the word of the gods. I'm the prophet of the Wag, and whole worlds burn in my bootprints. Listen up, you puddles of squig pus,
shouted Mad Dog Grotznik, glaring all around him at the grots assembled in the shadow of Ghazghkul's lifeless bonds.
You're going to work yourselves to squig meat, every last one of you. You know why? 'Cause I say so. Something's only impossible, you see, if Grotznik ain't done it yet. And since the boss is coming back, and it's going to be me who brings him, then this ain't impossible. Or that.
There was a faint flicker in the dark as a swarm of grots looked at each other in frantic incomprehension. But it didn't matter, because this time, not even Dripper was stupid enough to speak up.
But before we get to work,
added Grotznik, as his mind finally worked out what the master plan was,
I'm going to tell you a story. It's not one I've ever told anyone. It's not something anyone ever saw, besides one other orc. And it's why you're going to work your snot green asses off once I'm done. Because guess what? There was another time Ghazghkul died, after the first, and that time there was no Makari to get in the way. I brought him back, all by myself. And this is how it happened. Mad Dog Grotznik is the personal physician of Ghazghkul Mag Uruk Thraka. A pain boy obsessed with performing surgeries, looking for new experiments to poke and prod at the guts. Originally plying his trade on the world of Urk within the outpost of Rustspike, Grotznik found the corpse of a young Ghazghkul and repaired his skull with bionics, squig sinew, and an adamantium plate, making improvements to his lifeless body despite not bringing him back. Leaving his experiment in the pile of rubbish behind his surgery tent, when the lucky grot, Makari, took a peek, he somehow brought Gaz back, now tougher than he'd ever been, now acting as a vessel for Gork and Mork. Claiming tribes all across Urk, causing nubs of all kinds to get the Ghazghkul's special metal piece skull from Grotznik. As Gaz's war grew, so too did the infamy of the Mad Dog. Using such naive knobs as test subjects to root around in their brains, Grotznik put explosive charges inside should he need to get rid of his patients later, several instances causing the boys to realise what was up. Bringing in a death dread to repair, not knowing it was faking being asleep. Once inside, it pinned Grotznik to his own surgery table as the knobs watched its buzzsaw cut into his head until they got bored. His head operated on by his Gretchen assistants. One of the runts puked on his skull and even let a spider sneak into his brain box, bringing him back several times from death with a grot prod. Waking up absolutely bonkers ever since, Grotznik detonated all the remaining knobs' heads as revenge and began to conduct mega weird surgeries on other orcs and even himself. Trying out squig brain transfers, which a bunch of pain boys copied, Grotznik cut off his own limbs to replace with better ones, often pilfering bits from his patients. Protected by Ghazghkul, knowing his need to repair him from even bigger scraps, only a stupid idiot would volunteer to be worked on this deranged odd boy, even just for a patch-up. Replacing bits of his brain with new parts, causing him to hear the voices and even assume the personalities of his victims. His berserk rages, legendary among Ghazghkul's war, as Bartsy's stolen tried to wrestle control of his body. Leading his own band of death skulls, called the Corpse Looters, who nick materials to resupply his medical frigate, his involvement in the Second War for Armageddon earned him loads of loot. joining Ghazghkull during his withdrawal from Armageddon to follow the path laid out by Gork and Mork. Though Grotsnik doesn't believe in them like a proper orc, he knows wherever Gaz marches, he's sure to need medical procedures. Subjugating other pain boys to do his bidding. Some say he made this weird gubbins called a brain bot to store their thoughts when he doesn't need them anymore. Whatever the case, he's never strayed too far from the Prophet, so he can draw replacement ones to him. Joining Gaz's third war for Armageddon aboard a submersible during the invasion of Ive Tempestora. Even though he'd made improvements to the Prophet, the cramped conditions full of radiation damaged his finest work. Having already injected a bunch of poison into his neck to treat a rash, on the day of the landing, Grotsnik found Gaz in a rotten state, complaining about pressure in his head until it burst when Grotsnik attempted to loosen the intentionally over-tightened screws of his skull. The Blood Axe Chief General, Biter, buying time for Grotsnik to perform his surgeries. The clever Git lied that Gaz was fighting a sea monster outside the sub, detonating mines to pretend it was part of the scrap. Grotsnik closing the ruptures with his tools and transfusions of his own blood. After poking his head into Gaz's chest cavity to see why his heart wasn't moving, he found a clump of hardened molten plastic blocking his femoral artery. Knowing he was the one who put it there in the first place, Grotsnik unknowingly grabbed the banner of Makari, the lucky stick, to clear the blockage, reviving the Prophet the moment a squad of beakies broke into the surgery room. Saved once more by the Prophet, despite taking Ive Tempestora, Gaz eventually left Armageddon to find new scraps, pitting himself against the Git known as Ragnar Blackmane during what they call the Saga of the Wolf. Gaz's head lopped off by Ragnar, forcing Grotsnik to once again repair his body. The Mad Doc took the opportunity to improve upon his design within the captured Umi Cathedral, teleporting materials from his medical frigate in orbit to his operating room. Transfusion squigs, skin-lender squigs, and a bunch of stabby bits made changes to the Prophet. Grotsnik telling his grots that things are only impossible if he's not attempted them yet. His banks of stolen organs helped put Gaz back together, with even a goth called so angry he tried to fight himself, pulling out his own heart for the boss before collapsing. The grots dropping the heart on the floor, which burst on impact. Grotsnik's attendants further angered him, saying that they needed Makari to bring the Prophet back to life. Realizing his own use of the banner during his prior surgery, due to Makari being dead again, Grotsnik grabbed his underling Dripper and worked on making him into a lucky grot, using Gaz's severed hands, bringing both Makari and Gaz back from the brink. Last seen joining the warband of Beast Boss Bachman during the Blitz of Ive Proma, as the Wild Ghazghkull fought the skin thieves of King Byron. Grotsnik enacted another plot which would make Mork proud. Accidentally running over Bachman's Squigard with his pain bus, Grotsnik's actions caused the beast to frenzy, eating the imposing war boss and forcing Vultan the Patient to lead the warband in his stead. Offering Vultan his services in repairing his squig, in secret, Grotsnik experimented with the blood of the skin thieves, injecting it into a grot and other subjects, which caused violent reactions. His experiments leading him to confront Ghazghkull to show off his work. Within the Patriarch's chamber, the Prophet sat on its bloody throne, ready to argue with the Mad Doc. Proclaiming Gaz to be his monster, Grotsnik revealed his creation, a combination of an orc and a skin thief broodmind, telling Gaz he's nothing but an odd boy conduit to the gods what they made. Nothing more than a bucket full of holes, whose power comes from the Great Green, not himself. Grotsnik declared Gaz to be no true orc, pitting a similar abomination against him to bring him down a peg. The creature becoming more of a bug-eye than an orc as the battle continued. Though it vomited acid on Gaz's face and gored him plenty, Gaz manifested the Great Green within him, creating a barrier with his war cry. Green lightning repairing his armor and wounds as Orky light burned the creature to ashes. Grotsnik had achieved his goal to push Ghazghkull even further to being the best warlord he could be. Warning Grotsnik to never create another wrong orc again. The Mad Doc in secret toils on the body of Vultan the Patient, fitting an Eldar Soulstone into his eye in an attempt to harness the Great Green like Gaz does. For who can tell where Grotsnik's loyalties really lie, due to the many competing voices which scream in his head. But as long as he finds purpose in powering Ghazghkull, I guess he'll continue to stand by his side.
I'd had visions before. Most grots in Rustspike had. We weren't allowed in the brew huts or the fight sheds, so on the rare times when we managed to dodge our graft, we'd gather in groups of the grots we hated least, and guzzle the skinny mushrooms that grow in the warp-edged drops on the edge of town. They weren't much good, those visions. They were just headaches with colours, really. This was something else. This was an audience with the gods. It was nothing to start with, just dark and damp and cold. And then, way up above, there was a voice. Voices, in fact. They were so big and so deep it was hard to tell what language they were speaking, let alone what they said. But it must have been Gork and Mork, and they were fighting, which is fine because that's what they like doing best. I couldn't see it, but I could feel it. Massive, rumbling impacts that made the dark thunder and would have knocked me off my feet if I hadn't had any kind of presence. And then, a spark, a tiny little mote of green, bright and hungry, drifting down through many tusk lengths till it touched the floor wherever I was. The green spread out from that tiny point, rippling in big bright circles and pooling in spots that spread circles of their own. It spread faster and faster until everything was covered in it, as far as I could see. Now it was lit up. I could see I was in some kind of cavern, or rather, a big twisted mess of caverns, like the cells in a hive of sugar gits, but massive. The walls were meaty, I reckon is the word, damp and red and crinkly, like the folds in a brain, which I'd seen enough of in my brief life to know well enough. As the green gathered on them, they changed. They started sprouting fungus, moulds and slimes at first, the sort of stuff you eat when there's a dust storm on, and the orcs have had all the good grub. But then murkworts and billercaps and huge, complicated things, like nothing that grew on Urk. And just like it, is outside of Holy Visions, wherever the fungus grew, so did other green things. Squiglets first, the kind so small you can only see them as mean little specks digging into your armpits. Then squigs as big as talon tips and fists and heads. Next came snotlings, who are to grots what we are to orcs, crawling and yipping and scrapping with each other in big, writhing piles. Everywhere there was snotlings eating squigs and squigs eating snotlings, and with every jaw snap, gnash and gnaw, the green grew brighter and more alive. Then there were grots, swarms of grots, and they got straight to work lashing together meager little tools from squig sinew and catwood, and bullying the snots into working too. Faster than I could keep up with, they beat the fungal jungle back and started building farms and drops and brew huts and barracks. They were just in time for the first orcs, who were cleaving their way out of their grow holes now, and were hungry already. The orcs kept coming, and they kept getting bigger, until even the runts among them were as big as the war bosses on Urk. And above it all, way up, on what might have been the cavern roof, or might have been infinity, the stars were coming out. More stars than every mech on Urk could have counted in a lifetime, and every one of them that bright, angry, beautiful green. I was so distracted by the stars, I didn't see the squig off. It was a brilliant thing, a horrible thing, as big as a battle wagon it was, and it made the skinny, sag-throated beast raised by Urk's snakebite herders look pathetic. It nearly smashed me to mush with its foot. But I didn't live to be 3 years old by not being able to roll out the way of a stomp. Mork snicked fast, and once I was on my feet, I followed the beast. I don't know why, but it felt right. Soon, there was a whole herd of squiggles, lumbering along at something like a gallop, and barging each other with enough force to flatten forts. I ran along with them, though, through that untamable garden, and I didn't care if they stomped me flat, because it felt like fear wasn't something worth feeling in this place. Up above now, where the green stars shone, there were warriors, huge orcs, perfect orcs, everyone bigger than a clan chief, and rippling with green light. I don't know how I knew, but they was orcs, as they was meant to be. They glowed bright enough to outshine the stars, and as they strode through the sky, I could feel the gods above them, grinning down in violent pride. Then clashes and booms and roars started coming up ahead. The giants were wading into a scrap. It was hard to see what was going on, given I was looking up from between the flanks of the galloping squiggles. But it was a big fight. It kept getting bigger, and I think the orcs won. Surely, they could have lost. But then, when the noises of the fight faded away, the presence of the gods did too. It was like the whole cavern got cold and dark again, like it had been to start with. The squigoffs stopped in their tracks, and so did every other thing in the whole of the Great Green. It was like everything was lost, suddenly looking around and wondering what to do now. Of course, they started fighting. It was a frenzy, above and below, from the giants trading punches like comet strikes in the sky, to the snotlings wrapping skinny claws around each other's necks, down below. And we know gods to bang everyone's head together and tell them to pack it in. It went on until the whole place was like a butcher's tent, and there'd been enough murders for the survivors to have some space. It wasn't peaceful then, but it weren't a bloodbath neither, because all the really hard things, like the orcs and the sky, were dead. It went on for ages like that. There were orcs, still, but they were nothing like the colossal fighters who'd been there before, and they was all stuck down on the cavern floor. Watching them was a bit like watching raindrops get swiped away by a truck's hatch swipers. Every time one got big enough to seem like it might make it up to the sky, all the others nearby ganged up and beat it into shreds, so none of them got as big as they should have been. Until one day, that is. It wasn't even that big when it got attacked, but it was properly demolishing every orc that came at it, delivering headbutts like point-blank cannon strikes and pulling any survivors into line to fight alongside it. As more and more enemies flooded in, the fighter got larger, and so did the pile of bodies in front of it. Green lightning started to strike all around it, and soon that body pile reached all the way up to the sky. Seeing this, the new giant began climbing the mountain of the dead towards the stars. With every step, the winner grew more bulky, more vigorous. And soon, the cavern started glowing bright again. The stars swelled, and I knew that Gork and Mort was back, somehow. Or that they'd never been gone, but had just lost interest for a while, until there'd been something worth looking at again. Soon, the champion reached the top of the body pile, where the stars had grown so big there was no black left between them, and it stood there for a moment like it was thinking. Looking up at that titan, which had horns now, as well as loads of arms bearing all sorts of different guns and choppers, I was terrified. But I also knew what joy was for the very first time. And then the titan looked back down at me. There were starships flitting across the green sea of its one good eye, looking like tiny bingits. And as the full weight of that glare bore down on me, I thanked the gods that they'd let me die like this. But the giant didn't kill me. It curled a finger big enough to flick a moon into a planet, and it beckoned me. Then it turned and stepped into glorious, infinite green, leaving only flames in its boot prints.
Makari is a stupid grot who serves Ghazghkull Mag Uruk Tracker. Another worthless runt who apparently found the corpse of Ghazghkull Mag Uruk Tracker in a trash heap behind Grotsnik's shed. Apparently, he looked into the Prophet's eye when he woke up and saw a vision from Gork and Mork. Sharing Ghazghkull's vision of his Great Green and drafting him into his war, Gaz gave him a burning claw mark as a sign of his standing. Given a name and a reason to live, Makari is always at Thraka's side. His first duty would be to write down the vision he'd seen using his boss's blood written on scrap and metal with his fingers. Carrying the artifact known as the Lucky Stick, Makari also wears a necklace which has the bullet which pierced Gaz's brain as the banner waver of the Prophet of Gork and Mork. Watching Thraka kill a bloodthirster on the Hulk, World Killer, his life was ended by Grotsnik as he chucked him into war because he was annoyed. Waking up on what the Umis call Armageddon in a new body, after escaping his birthing tunnel, Makari got the name Lucky Grot and was taken to Thraka. Marking his skin again with his claw burn, Makari got all his memories back for some reason. I don't know, he's not orky, but I guess Ghazghkull likes him. Watching Thraka lose time and again during the War of Armageddon, old Balai kept stopping his crumping, forcing the Prophet to turn tail and run off to Golgotha. Ignoring Gork and Mork's orders, Thraka went back to Armageddon again. Makari told him he was doing the wrong war and got killed for it, but he came back, so don't feel sorry for the little runt. Thraka's mate Bullets well missed Makari, so Ghazghkull brought him back, which made Makari really sad, so he jumped into a volley of Umi gunfire, which is well stupid. Still, Ghazghkull brought him back loads, and each time, Makari did the same thing again. Little Snot was so upset about Thraka not doing as Gork and Mork said, he was willing to die for it. Telling Makari he wasn't wrong, and that he could see a war so mega, it would make all other wars look rubbish. Thraka got shot in the belly by a lemon wuss tank, making Makari well angry. So Makari crawled into the tin can and gutted the Umis inside. Thraka seeing Gork and Mork work through the Little Snot, realising he'd been wrong all along. Pulling back from Armageddon, again, to begin his great war, Gaz and Makari went to fight the bugs in the Octarian War to get stronger. That said, Ghazghkull got his head chopped off by a beaky called Ragmar. Him, who's got big teeth and swishy hair, longer than a hair squig, so you know he's proper strong, burying Makari under a bunch of rocks and stuff. Grotsnik, using bits of Thraka's arm and a body of bullets, brought back Makari without the aid of Gork and Mork, And when Makari woke up, he also saw that Ghazghkull was back, and meaner than ever. Last thing I know about Makari, he got captured by an Umi Inquisitor Lord called Nebs. His name was Fawkes. Anyways, they interrogated Makari, but not before Ghazghkull got his little snotling back. But yeah, Makari's still alive today, and he's just as annoying as ever. But don't tell Fracker I said that, you git, or I'll have to crump ya. Ugalad was a war boss of the Snakebites, serving Ghazghkull Mag Uruk Fracker. One of Gaz's best and baddest enforcers, who led his own tribe during the Second War for Armageddon. During the scrap to get Hades Hive, the Prophet of Gork and Mork was well annoyed with the Umis not dying quick enough. Sending Ugalad to sort it out, the Snakebites led a charge against the Umis, breaking through their defenses before being confronted by a wary old man. Dressed in his fancy uniform, with a deep scowl on his face, Ugalad was so impressed by the Umi's tenacity, he threw away his shooter to scrap with him up close and personal. Wounding each other until Ugalad cut off the Umi's arm with his claw, as Ugalad shouted his victory that this world is green, the smaller Git cut his head off with his chainsword. Refusing to collapse from the pain as he held Ugalad's claw in the air, the Snakebites fled, and when regrouping with the other boys, told stories about a new enemy known as Old Baelai. Old Baelai replacing his lost arm with Ugalad's power claw. For decades, this Umi known by them as Sebastian Yarrick proved to be the greatest enemy Ghazghkull Mag Uruk Fracker would ever face. Shame about Ugalad though, he might have been as mean and green as they come, but he never was good at shutting his gob when he should have. Ulftak Blackhawk is a war boss of the Bad Moons clan. Formerly a Stormboy under the Mech Lord, war boss of the Tekwa. During an Oathbreaker boarding with the Mech Boffin and Mad Dog Drosfang, Ulftak followed the commands of his boss, Badgit Snazhammer. Tasked with escorting the Boffin to the Cogboy Cruiser Warp Drive, alongside Mogrot Redtooth and Death Row, the mob of Badgit smashed through the Tech Priests. Stopped in their path by a Kistelin Tin Boy, Snazhammer died during his headlong charge, ironically losing his head, forcing the boys to use disguises of Cogboy bodies stapled to sheet metal to sneak past. Failing that, the boys attacked as a group, allowing Ulftak to reach Badgit's body. His mates hurling a bunch of stick bombs at the Tin Boy as Ulftak picked up the Snazhammer, striking the Tin Boy with his massive swing, stunning it briefly. Blackhawk lost both his legs and took a heavy punch to the chest as his mates broke up the Castellan. Doc Drosfang cutting off Ulftak's head and stapling it to Badgit's body. Now as the biggest Git in the mob, Blackhawk took control as their boss, ordering the Boffin to activate his Warp Decapitator next to the Warp Drive, causing a catastrophic diffusion, making a warp implosion happen. The Mechlord's fleet was reverted back to the Mechanicus cruiser's previous warp jump coordinates before being spat back into real space. The bodies of the Cogboys and Orcs transforming into warp Griblies. After a good scrap, the boys found themselves in orbit of the Forge World of Hephaestus alongside the fleet of Captain Badruk. The Mechlord's fleet, spearheaded by his flagship, Mork's Hammer, siding with the Blacktooth as they allied to pillage the planet. The Orcs descended upon the capital of Node Primus, with Ulftak and his boys riding on a lander. Some Iron Warrior called Gavrak Dalin, looking to blow up the big old warlord titan called Lux Annihilatus for revenge or something. As Umi Gargans deployed, Badruk teleported his men down thanks to the tech he got from Mogrok the Mangler alongside the Mechlord's Mega Gargan. Offering Ulftak a chance to join his crew, Blackhawk told him to zog off, stealing a dragster from some Git from the Cult of Speed, leaping through the Lux Annihilatus' shields, dragging a squig with him. Landing on the Titan's head and slipping through its eye socket to crump the crew, Ulftak released the Umi within its fluid tank and watched the squig tear at its flesh, naming the squig Princess after the Titan pilot it gored. As the Orcs pillaged the planet, Ulftak found himself a proper Garg shock rifle, which Princess would on occasion help him aim. Gavrak Dalin, well annoyed that the Orcs stole his thunder, with Ulftak calling himself the Gargan Smasher hereafter. His mate, Grand Genitor Capofenis Ul, lowered the void shield of his palace to allow the Orcs to get in. Wanting to capture some for their ritual, the Lexico Arcanus, Vika Yavonos, attempted to stop the Warpsmith and had a bit of a scrap, his retreat pushing him into a mob, which he put down, saving one for his binding ritual. Meeting with Ul to sacrifice the orcs he'd taken, Dalen summoned the Gargus demon engine to be created in real space for over 7 millennia, using the Forge World's primary power grid, the beastie calling itself T-Kanaroth. Betraying Kapoff and his Ul as part of the sacrifice, the Warpsmith allowed the demon to break the Void Shield array and pick fights with a bunch of Gargans. Ulftak and his boys nicking the grav tank to reach the factory's secret workshops. The Boffin customized a suit of beaky Centurion armor for Blackhawk, whilst he pocketed a bunch of prototype weapon plans. Marching out within his armor, now fitted with proper Dakar, Ulftak confronted Captain Badrock, who demanded the lion's share of the loot, despite being late to the party. Interrupted by the Cogboys and Tikanaroth, as they watched the beastie swallow a massive Gargan's heart and destroy the Mechlord's Mecha Gargan, Badrock, with no loot to steal from Gribbly's, refused to get involved. Nicking Badrock's personal flyer, Ulftak and the boys tried out his stacker on Tikanaroth, but found it to be useless. Blackhawk instead ejecting from the aircraft, allowing it to collide into the demon, pushing it into the Forge World's molten river. Softening his fall with the Centurion armor's prototype jump pack, as Badrock and the Mechlord met with him, the captain forgave him for stealing his flyer, impressed by how gog the spectacle was. Giving the Mechlord the blueprints he found about the Umi weapons, Ulftak was promoted to a big boss for his work, before the Badmoons and Freebooters investigated the archaeotech what the Warpsmith and Demon Engine wanted so badly. Badrock teleported away with the Gubbins, escaping aboard the Blacktooth, as the Badmoons escaped the erupting volcanoes, plunging the Forge World into mayhem. The Mechlord vowed to get vengeance against the captain. The Tekwa following Badrock's trail until they got distracted by an Exodite maiden world called Shao Ha. After purging the Pansies, the Orcs began to settle scores made during Hephaestus. The Evil Sun's rider, Riptooth, demanded a race to put Ulftak in his place for stealing his dragster. The Boffin built a truck before sunrise to keep Black Orc's reputation intact. Fitted with massive jets on its back, and replacing its engines with something proper massive. As the race began, the Spiky Pansies interrupt the event, not that the Evil Suns minded, spicing things up. Shooting a bunch of raiders with his shock rifle until their Archon cut off his hand, Princess saved Ulftak from a fatal shot to the head, forcing the Spikies to regroup as Riptooth gained the lead. Ulftak activating the jets of his truck as it careened off a rocky outcrop. It crashed onto the Archon's fleeing skimmer and snatched victory of the race from the Evil Suns, earning their respect for the big boss. Ordering Doc Drosfang to replace his hand as the Spikies returned for another go, Ulftak's warband chased the Spikies into their home of Port Tavar in Komora, much to the annoyance of the trueborn Archon of the Hollow Art, Daemara Frakes. Allying with another Spiky Archon called Zophar Oridrade of the Cabal of the Wounding Wind, as the edgy Pansies rallied to rebel, Ulftak found himself to have grown too big for his Centurion armor. Growing well smart with each growth spurt, Ulftak led his men through the web of deceptions and sneaky traps laid by the Spikies, their passage through their third portal tipping him off that maybe someone was intentionally herding him into a trap. Retrofitting the portal technology with help from the Boffin to strike at the Spikies from the skies, using Weirdboy Uskop as a conduit. No matter how cunning they were, none could stop Black Orc's rampage. Daemira fighting Ulftak herself, almost losing her life in the process. As the Archons retreated, they sent a bunch of mandrakes to assassinate Black Orc as a compromise. Attacking Ulftak when he was alone, the mandrakes failed to crump him with Princess by his side. The sneaker gets all gored up, forcing their leader, Kerazul, to run away. The Boffin using Ulftak's shock rifle and salvage scrap to track the Archon's location. Meanwhile, the Spikies recruited the Grand Succubus of the Deathly Sorrow, Zerzuli Mindrex, to help him capture Ulftak. Agreeing only if they put him in her arena, Mindrex's forces managed to inject Black Orc with a potent poison which swells bodies to bursting. Yet whilst Ulftak grew in size, he refused to pop. Daemira confronting him in his cell, unnerved by his callous disregard for death's inevitability. His sharp growth and mass also unlocked new heights of intelligence, making him more cunning than ever before. His warband tracking his location, using the tether frequency of the Snazhammer to his hand. As they toiled, Ulftak faced his first opponent in the arena, a Beaky of the Crimson Fist's first company. No match for Ulftak, now at his massive size. Black Orc chucked a beaky into the stalls of the Spikies, letting him vent his frustrations with his chainsword. His next opponent, proving a much better match, but not what he expected. Seeing his old mate, Death Row, mangled into the form of a spiky grotesque, Ulftak pummeled him into mush, so he stopped being an Orky for the least amount of time. Ulftak's boys attacking the arena, allowing him to reach for his Snazhammer. Weirdly, instead of coming to him, he teleported to it, finding himself in the gore of some poor git among Princess, Mulgrot Redtooth, the Boffin, and Nizwit. Confronting all 5 of the Spikies, Dimira, her brother Dalgar, Master Emunculus, Macutalex, Grand Succubus Zerzuli, and Zophar Oridrade. Ulftak crumped Maculatix and Zerzuli as their poison did little to slow him down. Daemira, watching her flagship, Art's End, fire upon the Spikies on the surface now that it was crewed by Orcs. Ulftak bargained the means to open the portal to leave Gamora or allow her vessel to collide and destroy everything. Offering her brother as a prisoner, Ulftak accepted and teleported away with Dalgar, leaving behind the Dark City in order to answer the call of his war boss, the Mech Lord. Finding his flagship, Mork's Hammer, aboard his now renamed cruiser, Star Smasher, Ulftak lured the Mech Lord aboard to wrestle control of the War from his grip, now that he was big enough to challenge him. Now of similar bulk, Ulftak piledrived the Mech Lord into the floor, flattening his head, but having his own hand cut off as repayment. Splitting the Mech Lord's head in two with the Snazhammer, Ulftak ordered the crew of the Star Smasher to fire the stolen weapon of the Art's End, Voidbreaker, the largest dark lance of its kind, destroying Mork's Hammer and ensuring his rise as war boss. Ulftak now leading his own war, with Doc Drosfang and the Boffin as his lieutenants. Who knows what this brutal and cunning war boss will do next, in his attempt to be the orkiest war boss who ever lived.
Grug Face Ripper is a Zoggin maniac who led the Red War. Once serving the Goth war boss, Krug the Tyrant, Grug uses boss's own claw to rip his face off, which is where he gets his nickname. Ruling his former boss's tribe, keeping the power claw as a symbol of his Gog. Grug's well easy to annoy, and one time, he trashed an entire settlement of orcs because a stupid grot spilled oil on his breakfast, causing him to use his claw's buzzsaw to tear through everyone around him like butter. Ripping through a drop pod to crump the beakies inside during the slaughter of Black Gulch. Grug tore 10 of them to pieces, which really annoyed the brothers, calling themselves the Obsidian Glaives. Covered in thick knotty scars, which he earned through tons of crumping, Grug is always in the thickest of Daka, never wiping the blood from his enemies off, leaving a crust of it on his skin. Ordering his rants to clean off the gore, as he's too orky to do it himself. His tribe say he never lost a fight, even when leading a war of his own, the Red War. Named after the gore his men paint on their ships, Grug never intended to make a war, it just sorta happened. Orcs travelling to the Secundus Reach just to see the Zoggin maniac for themselves, having heard of his skill at Daka. Many believing he's the chosen of Gork, as his war grows with every battle. Even the Ginger Beaky, Crom Dragon Gaze, had a scrap with Grug and didn't manage to kill him. However, during the Red War, Big Mech Mogrok, who led a tribe of Bad Moons, set up a bunch of accidents to kill Grug, taking control of a large chunk of boys to take with him. Grug surviving the explosion meant to kill him. He now swears he'll get vengeance against Mogrok and his Morky ways, setting upon Umis within the Barghast stars to keep him busy until then, taking over the worlds of Tremendix and Deposia at the head of his new war. Hopefully, this Goth will crump Mogrok to Mangler and maybe eat his face off like his former boss. Captain Badrock is an orc freebooter of the Bad Moons clan. Some saying he is the greatest captain who ever lived. This ugly war boss been shining medals on his coat, stolen from the Umis he duffs from boarded cruisers. His mouth split into a gnarly grin forever, cause it's crammed full of teeth. Badrock stole a bunch of gold from the Palace of Undying Light, melting it down to platinum so his smile is always sparkling. His gold tooth armor, likewise shiny if you can see past the blood spatters, his so-called Jolly Orc ensigns say he's well guard at a scrap, as that gold which plates his panoply is taken from other freebooter captains.
weighed down by his lead-lined overcoat, which protects him from the radiation made from his shooter, the Ripper. Also, why is there so many knobs using Ripper in their stuff? Anyways, this shooter, taken from an Umi planet knob, shoots plasma instead of slugs. So if you get shot by the Ripper, you'll get poisoned by the radiation, even if you get away. Knowing the Ripper will probably explode one day and take his life, Badrock doesn't care much, as his chopper, boss pole, and stick bombs delay such an event, with his 3 Gretchens called the Power Grots carrying his ammo. His kill cruiser, called the Black Tooth, legendary among all the clan's histories. It's anyone's guess how much Naz he had before he got kicked out of the Badmoons clan for having too much. Goring a Norn Queen scrapping with a tendril of Eye Fleet Kraken as part of Warlord Garagag's fleet. During the War of Daka, Badrock once outgunned a bunch of blue grots and even smashed a tin free blade using just a hair squig and a drunken snotlin. Some saying he even killed a Welgarg Void Whale to grow his reputation. I've even heard some shady git is paying Badrock to scrap with the Wolf Beakies within the Sanctus reach. Allying with the Mech Lord to raid the world of He Face Toe in order to steal some of them STD templates the Umis always want to grab. Badrock betrayed the Mech Lord, escaping with his loot before he got gored. Mega cunning and proper Morky, anyone who wants to guarantee victory of their war pays Badrock massive amounts of teeth to help with their planning. The Big Mech Mogrog the Mangler giving him a bunch of tech to help his Daka on Alaric Prime. His men burying their teeth on Baron worlds so it's not nicked by their rivals. Other tribes offering Welgarg shooters so they don't get snicked by Badrock or his flash kits and love when they get to see him Daka. Always threatening misery if anyone attempts to take the biggest pile of loot when the scrap is done. No one's stupid enough to get revenge against Badrock, cause they know they'll be the next one gored if they try.
Umis thinks they's the smartest, making twisty plans and laying cunning traps like they comes up with war. We comed up with the war. All the boys need is a shove in the right direction. Mork will do the rest.
The Greenskins are brutal in the extreme in their methods of waging war. Characteristically, there is little to divide one from another when analyzing their ambitions, strategies, and demeanor. Yet like any creature, there do exist outliers amongst the many orc war bosses and overlords, with some notable exceptions even exhibiting signs of what one might call intelligence. So today, we shall be elucidating an orc renowned not just for his cunning, but also his seeming ability to create weapons of war on a cataclysmic scale. The orc war boss of the Badmoons clan, Mogrok the Mangler. Before their meteoric rise to power as one of the single most deadly tribes of the Orc Badmoons clan, the Splitgrins would scavenge for survival on the desert world of Aroc. Fighting the rival Goth clan of the planet, the Skullcrackers, the war boss of the Splitgrins, Skagthing, would trade the spoils of their skirmishes to freebooters whom would frequent the system. Armed with the greatest weaponry amongst all the clans of the system, the Splitgrins would stave off the larger forces of the Goth tribes. Within the Skullcrackers, the war boss, Krug the Tyrant, would rule with an iron fist. Yet a new power would begin to grow within his ranks, an orc by the name of Gruck. Even as an orc boy, Gruck would tower over his kin and be known for his strength. Krug would keep watch of his subordinates' growing power, and though wishing to be rid of Gruck, Krug would allow his survival due to needing his strength to bolster the Skullcracker tribe. Yet fate would intervene with the arrival of a big mech to the planet's surface, Mogrok the Mangler. Blasted from the cannons of a freebooter warship, Mogrok would impact on Irok's surface and seemingly be marooned with no hope for salvation. Yet Mogrok would begin to craft his own vessel with the scraps of debris that littered the dunes. His ingenuity might be enough to create his own escape vessel, yet aid would come to the Big Mech from a strange and unlikely ally, Gruck. Originally intending to set upon the Big Mech, Grug would be convinced to instead join forces with Mogrok, for soon they would see to the rule of a new war boss, of the Skullcrackers. Awakening and fanning the flame of ambition within Gruk, Mogrok would bait his new protege with the promise of great spoils far from the surface of Irok. Yet to claim these spoils of war, Gruk would first need to assemble his own Waaagh. Charging into the fortress of the Skullcrackers, Gruk would fight his way to Krug's hut. Confronting the tyrant, Gruk would challenge him for the title of War Boss. Knocking Krug from his feet, the two orcs would soon struggle for dominance. Bloodying each other in equal measure, their brutal onslaught would tear apart the fort as they hurled themselves through the foundations of the tribe. As the battle turned, Krug would strike the upstart Gruk with his power claw and cast him into the courtyard of the fort. Looking down upon the broken form of Gruk, the tyrant would prepare to end his existence with a snap of his claw. Yet Gruk's willpower would bear out as he grabbed the war boss at the last moment and snapped his power-clawed arm. Wrestling for the final act of violence, Gruk would prove to be stronger than his former war boss, and as the tyrant's eyes widened in shock, Gruk would activate the power claw's saw blade and force it to bite deep into the war boss's face. Gruk had now earned his new title as the freshly crowned war boss of the Skullcrackers, Gruk Face Ripper. Rallying his forces, Gruk would see to the demise of the Badmoons of the Splitgrins and their war boss, Skagfing. Sacrificing his men by the dozen, Skagfing would buy himself only moments before being pinned to the ground, his face torn a chunk at a time from his skull by Gruk. Suddenly, Irok's orcs had been conquered and subsumed under a single banner, the Skullcrackers of Gruk Face Ripper. Consolidating his power and standing unchallenged as the war boss of the tribe, Gruk would be visited by Mogrok the Mangler once more with promises of greatness. For his counsel, Mogrok would be gifted every piece of scrap he would need to assemble his void ship. Crafting his chariot of ascension, Mogrok would venture into the void and find the freebooters that had marooned him. Bringing Gruk and his warband to aid him in his retribution, they would crush the freebooters under their heel and absorb the disparate ranks into the fold of the now renamed Red Waaagh. Now the advisor to one of the most promising upstart Waaghs of the galaxy, Mogrok would bide his time and watch as Gruk's fortunes would grow. Yet with the influx of Splitgrins into the tribe, a new threat to Gruk's power would scheme to undermine him. Gashrak the Flash, former first mate of the infamous Captain Badrock, would manipulate his new war boss, Gruk, into allowing him to plunder the most ripe planets of the Ultima Segmentum. Pillaging the moons of Palos of their diamond mines, Gashrak would even run pit fights on the prison planet of Night's End and rig the outcome of many of the higher-staked bouts. Putting the share of Gruk's loot within his own vessels under the guise of protection, Gashrak would wait for his war boss to become distracted before pocketing the spoils for himself. Seeing an opportunity, Mogrok would also undermine Gruk Face Ripper by also using the Red Waaagh for his own selfish means. Siphoning valuables from the distracted war boss, Mogrok would also incorporate the Splitgrin's custom weapons in order to construct his own groups of Gorkanauts and Morkanauts. Yet soon the rise of the Red Waaagh would clash with the Imperium of Man, with their capture of human slaves to amuse themselves within the fighting pits of Night's End. With Imperial fleets combating the Orcs, more and more new recruits for the Waaagh would join Gruk's burgeoning forces, turning the once sleepy sector of space into a treacherous greenskin stronghold. Amassing billions of greenskins under his banner, Gruk Face Ripper would seek to dominate the Ultima sector by crippling its last remaining strongholds, including the Astartes' homeworld of the Obsidian Glaives, Obsteria. Led by their chapter master, Midnias, the 5 battle companies of the Obsidian Glaives would defend their homeworld and fortress monastery, the Penumbral Spike. Yet Chapter Master Midnias would be slain by Gruk Face Ripper, leaving only one final stronghold to defend the sector, the night world of Alaric Prime. With the Sanctus Reach now desperate for salvation, it would fall to the House of Alaric to defend the sector. Requesting aid from the Scola Progenium world of Edificus, The last bastion of the sector would be fortified with Cadian infantry and armored divisions. Long divided and squabbling amongst themselves, House Alaric would end their feuding to face a common enemy. As the Red War descended upon the Night World, humanity would make its stand. Losing tens of thousands of orcs to the initial invasion attempts, Gruk would grow angered with the continual stubborn defiance of the planet. Yet the Red War numbered in the billions and were content with hurling their overwhelming numbers onto the blades of the Imperium. At the battle for Sacred Mountain, Gruk Faceripper would take to the field, intent on breaking his enemies once and for all. Facing the Freeblade Knight, Gerantius, the Forgotten Knight, Gruk would be no match for such a valiant stalwart of humanity. Gravely wounded within a blast of grenades, Gruk would attempt to flee, yet Gerantius would strike the wreckage of his personal battle wagon with a mighty kick of his steed's foot, crushing Gruk Faceripper and ending his Red War. Broken in spirit, the orcs of the Red War would retreat. Scattered by the Imperium, the Red War would clump into clans once more and seek to be amongst those bearing the same markings and paints of their origins. Civil war would break out between the clans, with new leaders taking command of the scraps of the Red War. Yet Mogrok had planned for such a splintering of the War and had already begun to form a War of his own. Planning the continual emboldening and eventual fall of Gruk for many years, Mogrok would muster his Badmoons and loyal forces within his gargantuan voidship of Scrap, Tooth o' Mork. With his assembled mech boys, looters, battle wagons, and other horde contingents, Mogrok would attack the largest Imperial Guard force within the sector. Ambushing the humans, Mogrok would use this initial strike to bring more orcs into the fold of his army by a show of incredible force. Forcing the rival war boss's hands to not be seen wanting, they would also rush to attack the humans. Enacting his so-called Big Scrap, Mogrok would use such shows of force to install himself as the de facto new war boss of the War. Utilizing his cunning and natural ability to construct and adapt great weapons, armor, and vehicles, Mogrok would leverage his talents to barter and trade for powerful allies. Salvaging everything in the wake of their destruction of Alaric Prime, the orcs under Mogrok would tinker and craft new weapons from the scraps of war. The spoils of the War of Cunnin were so great that advancements in orc technology would be unparalleled, with Mogrok even constructing the fearsome Claw of Mork. An immense tractor cannon, the Claw of Mork would drag comets from the surface of a planet in order for them to cause catastrophic damage to the surface, whilst his own forces would be protected under force fields. Despite its disabling by a battalion of Tempestus Scions, Mogrok would assault House Alaric's last remaining stronghold. Bringing captured and vandalized Imperial Knights to spearhead the assault, Mogrok would personally lead his war to overwhelm the Imperium's defenses. The White Warden of House Tigalio would lead his knights to aid the Freeblade Gerantius in his quest to end the Greenskin threat. Despite their valiant efforts, the comet clawed from the skies by the Claw of Mork would decimate the planet. With only the orcs and humans covered under the protection of power fields surviving the impact. Some humans would survive with the protective shielding sacrificed by the noble knights of House Alaric, and under the rubble of war, a survivor of the comet's fury would emerge. Gruk Faceripper. Mogrok would abandon the world with the resurgence of the rage-fueled war boss, and with reinforcements of the space wolves of Fenris, Alaris Prime would be salvaged. Yet Mogrok would soon ally with the merciless freebooter captain, Badruk, to which he still pledges his service. Yet any so-called ally of Mogrok the Mangler should be wary, for such allies often become victims of such a treacherous and deadly foe.
You're rich, you're flashy, you have a proper orky stoutness about your belly. And you've got more big, shooty, and dead-hard gear than any two other orcs put together. The other clans ought to make some way for the Bad Moons. Nazdreg Ugg Erdgrub is a warlord of the Badmoons clan. A well-rich war boss who makes his teeth as a pirate. This flashy git loves raiding Umi supply lines to fill his pockets with nosh. His custom shooter, known as the Blaster X, firing plasma with shocking accuracy. His boy's armed with well-gogged shooters and choppers. His cunning is so gog that he speaks fluent Gothic and keeps loads of Umis as workers to help his Gretchen in their tasks. Never wanting to lead a war, cause he might lose some of his stuff, Nazdreg is happy to let Gazgul Mag Uruk Thraka lead the Great War, helping him if he's paid well enough. Bullying his mechs to create ever weirder stuff, like the teleporters made by his underling, Archimedes. After many attempts, Nazdreg's boys use them on the world of Piskina 4 to fight the Beakies, known as the Dark Angles. Helping Gaz during the Third War for Armageddon, using his Space Hulk, Ognosdreg, Garg the Slag Hulk, which the Umis called Skeeler, to teleport his boys to the surface. Nazdreg fled from the system before they could hurt him. Retreating to the Abyssus sector during 998.M41, on the world of Charakis, Nazdreg forced the conquered Umis into labor pens, offering them both punishment and reward for good work. Crash landing his Space Hulk on the world of Medusa 4, ordering his boys to gather all the scrap they could carry. Having been spat from the warp, even this slippery war boss knew he couldn't survive the warp storms which soon ate up the planet. Escaping Medusa 5 after a good scrap with the locals, though the Umis managed to disable his Space Hulk, Nazdreg escaped using the captured ship, Minnow, using a fake distress call for a pickup by the battleship Terra's Defiance. Boarding the ship and crumping the crew, Nazdreg and his boys are still roaming the stars aboard their pilfered battleship. When hearing of the War of Daka, Nazdreg couldn't resist the call of more flash. Fighting alongside enclaves, Nazdreg assimilated the leadership Orc Empire of Alsanta into his tribe. Command alongside, invading the Orc capital of Dregog, hoping to kill Nazdreg. Stopping the war boss from using his ship's telefraggers to burn the worlds of Damocles, Nazdreg and his battle fortress, known as Git Crusher, was swallowed by a portal with the crumping of its shock projectors, never to be seen again. No one knows where Nazdreg's gone since, but maybe Mork has a special plan in mind for this cunning war boss. Either way, I don't care, cause he's not sharing none of his teeth with me, is he?
Gorgut's Headhunter is a war boss of the Blood Axes and Evil Sons. Rising from the ranks of the clans of Lorne 5, such as the Foot Stompers, by turning their squig-offs against them, uniting all orcs on the Ice World, as Gorguts led his war, crushing all dissenters with his exoskeleton armor. Scrapping with the Umi Lord General Stern, Gorgut sided with the spiky git, Lord Crow of the World Eaters, until they grew tired of each other. Turning on Crow to put his head on his pointy stick, their disagreement over a Umi Gargan, Titan Dominatus, allowed the Imperi Room and Pointies to team up, driving off Gorguts' war. Reorganizing his men to scrap on the world of Cronus. During the Dark Crusade, after assimilating freebooters and pirates from loads of raids of the Damocles Gulf into his war, the Umis and Fishies shot down his customized rock asteroid. Drawing the feral orcs from the old war into his forces and mounting loads of skulls on his pointy stick, Gorguts' war was beaten by the Beakies, known as the Blood Ravens, after they purged the world of their own Umi ally, General Alexander. Regrouping the boys within the Ko-Rava system, Gorguts once more brought the feral orcs of Ko-Rava 2 into his war, outfitting them with proper Daka. Crumping all the armies such as the Beakies, including the pompous git Captain Boreal, the entire Ko-Rava system became green, having beaten the snot out of everything in Gorguts' path. Upgrading his custom Power Claw to allow him to vault about and crump up close well easy. His massive body had to be put into an even Garga Mega Armor exoskeleton. Yet the most Garg of wars fought by Gorgas would be made fine beside the big boss, Git Stomper. His task in taking the night world of Cyprus Ultima to nick its scrap fueled his resentment at being Git Stomper's underling. Building a big old gun for Git Stomper within Varlock Keep to blow up the pansies, Gorgut sabotaged the cannon, leaving Git Stomper to get gored by Farsi and Maka. Taking over Git Stomper's war to add to his own forces, Gorguts watched as the Umis rained down scrap from the skies, defending Star Fort Ilios. Drawing all the rival war bosses to him to claim the war for themselves. After grabbing as much scrap as they could in the meantime, Gorguts beat up Gitstomper's lieutenants, Weird Boy Zagnoggin and Big Mech Wazmaka, forcing them into his war. Telling his new mates of the Spear of Cain which he learned about on Koh Rava, the super pointy stick was a prize too Garg to pass up. Crashing Wazmaka's kill cruiser into the Umi Star Fort, Karen, to disable its Dakar, the Bloodraven Beakies couldn't stop the war of Gorguts, gaining the notice of the Pansies. Farsi and Maka and Ranger Ronan meeting with Gorguts to reach the Spear of Cain, explaining they wanted to crump the Archon, Kyr, and will let Gorguts take the relic. Accompanying the Pansies to the vault which contained the spear, Ronnie backstabbed Gorguts by shooting the Pansies defending the vault, forcing a massive scrap as he escaped. Crumping the Wraith Lord Valador, while Maka's Pansies took the fight to the main base to rescue the Farsi at Taldir. As the scrap intensified, the Beaky, Gabriel Angelos, blew up Wazmaka's cannon, which was supposed to break open the vault. The Umis in orbit bombarding the vault to blow up everyone, even with Gabe in the firing zone. Farsi Akaya snuck in following the blast, followed closely by Gorguts, spearheaded by the Morkanaut, Big Booty. Pushing ahead of the Umi and Pansy lines, Gorguts came so close to grabbing the spear, but was ambushed by Kaya. His attempt to deliver the killing blow, stopped by the spear's hidden secret. Not a pansy weapon, but rather a gribbly one, Kaya died as a sacrifice, which released a weird thing of corn, casting a shroud over Cyprus Ultima. Teaming up with the Pansies and Beakies to crump the Bloodthirster, empowered by the souls of the dead Gits on the surface for ages, Gorguts and Maka destroyed the Gribbly spires to weaken the beastie. Lifting the shroud, which made the beastie smaller, Gabe Angle joined what Maka called the Wayfarers, which were prophesied to kill the beastie, called Storm Prince. Calling his mate crewing the cruiser, Dauntless, helmed by that Captain Balfaxar to crash onto the planet, all that remained was the altar of the spear containing the beastie. Killing the Storm Prince together before dissolving their alliance, Gorguts took the super pointy stick as his spoils. His rampages continuing so long as there's new heads to pop on his trophy rack.
Gargaz Teethgrabber is a war boss of the Bad Moons clan. Once a shooter boy who used to feed the squigs of war boss Ogruk Gutwrecker. During the invasion of the hive world of Luteus Alpha, his boss decided to let him join his mob, having heard of him killing a commissar, which in truth was killed by his air squig. Hoping to take all the Prometheum loot out of Lutium, during the flight to the surface, Ogruk decided he wanted Gargaz's air squig, shoving him off the heavy bomber and nicking it, saying as war boss he gets all the snazziest loot. Surviving the fall, moving to the nearest orc camp, Gargaz crumped the Nob leader and took over his mob, leading him to the Umi base nearby to nick something to get to Gutwrecker's cruiser. Smashing the Bane Blade, Bastion of Valor, fighting no Umi fighters, landers or anything. Teethgrabber left his boys behind, stumbling into the lair of a bunch of bug-eyes calling themselves the Cult of the All-Seeing Emperor. Crumping the Patriarch, causing the weirdos to run away. Gargaz faced the Beakies known as the White Scorers within the Luteus Alpha base, goring up their chaplain. Confronted by the Tin Boy, Auric What's-His-Face, the yapping git for all his Dakar couldn't stop Gargaz from crumping him, moving on to nick the Beaky Thunderhawk, which he used to reach Gutwrecker's cruiser. Crashing into the cruiser and smashing up any git in his way. After crash landed once again on the surface, Gargaz had a proper orky scrap with Ogruk, who was riding a massive stomper. Beating the snot out of Gutwrecker and reclaiming his air squig, Gargaz now rules the war of Teethgrabber, shooting Dakar at anyone who thinks they're hard enough. Grimskull was a war boss who started the War of Groya. Fitted with a mega armor exoskeleton, armed with a big shooter and power claw. His assault of the planet aboard his kill cruiser was blown up by a stupid Beaky called Tight-Ass. Hoping to get his hands on an Ubi Gargant before the Beakies could stop him, Grimskull got distracted and tried to get a blue sparkly thing which powered Grya's Dakar.
Stupid tight ass unplugged the sparkly thing, making Grimskull's wire get more stuck in. That Inquisitor Drogon talking him into putting it into another gubbins to try and rip Grimskull's wire's brains up to bits. Luring Grimskull away from the weaker Umi gits so they could regroup. When Drogon put the sparkly thing into the gubbins, it fired a thingy what didn't affect Grimskull but made them Griblies join to scrap. Swamped by a bunch of weird things who dragged Grimskull down to the depths of the spire. The weird boss rambled on about some stupid plot or something until Grimskull climbed his way back up, accidentally saving Tight-Ass's life. Wrestling the spiky git called Nemiroth, cause Tight-Ass wasn't any fun no more. Though Grimskull fell from a well-high place, his assertion that he ain't that easy to kill proved right. Facing Tight-Ass alone to prove who was more Garg. Though he wasn't done with the Beaky, clearly he was done with him, as a blast of Daka blew his head off. Shame about Grimskull, I kinda liked him, but he should have known you don't scrap with the protagonist who's on the cover of the box.
Zadsnark the Ripper is a war boss speed freak of the Evil Sons. A well-garged biker boy who dackers as part of the war of war boss Garagak. This evil son has raided the Segmentum Tempestus with trucks, war bikes, and anything that goes fast, armed with his own power blade on his left arm, which shares his nickname. Riding his custom war bike called the Beast, not to be confused with the War of the Beast, or the War of the Beast, or that Beast of Calf. Anyways, its scale into his massive size stops smaller orcs from driving it, armed with loads of shooters and scorchers. Always striking directly at gits to crump 'em quick like. His head-on charges smash everything to bits, hating on anyone who uses more key tactics such as Weird Boys, Pain Boys or Mechs. Fighting the Elysian plot troopers on the world of Castoral Novum, he defended the renamed planet of mechs like Ix to protect its factories, with not even these flying gits able to stop the Ripper Stampede. Wazdaka Gutsmech is a bike boy of the Evil Sons. The most Garg speed freak to ever live, leading his own war. This mech boy rides his custom turbo-powered war bike, known as the Bike of Apocalypse. Armed with his Daka cannon, was able to smash even the Umi tanks. Tinkering with the gubbins of his bike ever since he left the desert planet of Kassak Prime. After stripping down countless bikes all his life, no one knows him better in all of Orc culture, with only his Gretchen Fix-It allowed to clean it. Winning the race of the burning wheels, riding a warbike made of scraps. Though his rival said he cheated, he went on to destroy the settlement where the race was held, leaving only rubble in his wake. Never sleeping, thanks to the stims made by Mad Dogs in his tribe. After many years riding alone, Wazdaka fights to unite all orcs into a war, which will never end, riding into the sunset forever. Killing an Umi warlord Titan during the siege of Scalex 6. The sight of him launching from a cliff edge to ride through its void shields is well Garg, smashing into the cocky pit to butcher the crew. Mounted the skull of the Gargant's Princeps and his men onto his warbike, which is still on fire to this day. Wazdaka continues to grow, fueled by Umis who tend to his factories to make bikes, trucks, and other stuff for his war to ride. Zagstruck is a well-Garg storm boss. Said to have been born within an Umi settlement, which he had to fight his way out of to reach his parent tribe. This proper angry orc is said to have stared down a Squiggoth until it stopped rampaging, as this war boss has no tolerance for stupidity within his crew, goring any git who fails him in their duty. Simply called the Boss by the Storm Boys who gather to join him. So legendary is his rage that all tribes want to see his temper explode, just to witness the spectacle. Never letting a day pass without crumping, usually of his own men. So Garg is his reputation that for every one of his boys gored, 2 more stand ready to replace him. His bionic legs, known as the Vulture's Claws, taken from a beaky dreadnought. After losing his legs, Zagstruck tore its core gubbins apart with his sharpened teeth, using its weapons to craft the claws. Looting the pointy world of Lyrithar during 982.M41,
Zagstruck drove them wild riders of Samham into the warp, chasing them with his rocket pack and his storm boys as their portal closed behind them. Seen 10 months later within the encampment of Warboss Golgrot, Zagstruck caught dozens of looters stealing their fighter bomber with a batch of red pansy helmets strapped to his belt. Leading his vulture squad to pillage anything not nailed down, they all latch onto the bottom of his personal fighter bomber called the Vulture, ready to plummet into scraps feet first, enacting his flyby decapitations. Gathering a Storm War to end all Storm Wars, adding blood axes and goths to his mobs. Last we saw a Zagstruck, he remade the shrine world of St. Redmond's Ope, rebuilding its Umi cathedrals into his own image.
The Red Gobbo addressed the grots in the cage with him.
That was proper stupid, you know,
He said,
saying you was all the Red Gobbo. I was going to give myself up, and you all would have had a chance to survive. Now we is all proper dead.
Nah, boss,
Tronk said.
we all is the Red Gobbo, and just like you said, we's gonna die as free grots.
Not your fault, boss.
Wart said.
Well, it kind of is, I suppose. Because you was boss, and it was your plans we've been following. But still, we gave the orcs a good crumping, didn't we?
Wart looked out at the stand full of roaring, cheering orcs.
Well, some of them, anyways. Still, least we can say we had fun, right?
Wart looked around at the other grots in the cage. None of them looked like they were having a lot of fun.
Yeah, probably not that either. Still, like Tronk said, at least we was gonna die.
You mean at least we is going to die as free grots?
The Gobbo said. Out in the arena, the orcs gave a tremendous roar as Warboss Brucker Bloodspiller began descending the steps towards the fighting pit. When he neared the bottom, he jumped, launching himself through the air and landing with a thump in the sand. He boomed a guttural cry as he held his arms wide, turning in a circle, soaking in the admiration of his warband.
No, I mean at least we was gonna die.
The Red Gobbo is a stupid grot who thinks he's Garg. This git said to first be seen leading the rebel grots on the world of Gorka Morka within the Ghost Stars region. While some snots believe he's just a myth, his influence has spread all across orc culture. Not a singular git, but rather a position which a grot can assume should they wear a red cape and some goggles. It's calls for the Revolution, rally its mates to scrap with orcs, which is well stupid. Some run a Demekwa called Fingwit, the first to become the Gobbo outside of Gorka Morka, was part of the fingers of the Evil Sun's boss, Claws. Claws injured during their boarding action against an Umi ship. Fingwit was told to disable the Umi Daka by Claws before he died, leading his mates to the bridge. Nicking a shooter from a dead snakebite, which another orc didn't take too kindly to, Fingwit, after escaping to safety, realized he could disobey his masters. Assuming the mantle of the Red Gobbo, using his skills at tailoring to make himself a red cape, Fingwit killed the ship's Umi captain and took control of the ship. Renaming it the Gobbo's Revenge and turning its Daka on the rest of their fleet, the Red Gobbo established the Gretchen Revolutionary Committee, or Committee for short, and decided to attempt to take the fight to the orcs. Probably gored the moment he boarded the Evil Sun ships. Though Fingwit was never seen again, the legend of the Red Gobbo continues to distract them from their work. The next known sighting of the Gobbo, during the invasion of some planet within the Cathedral of Sanguinius, the least worst of Runtard Killiskin's herd, Redsnot, barricaded his mates from the traitor Commissar, Marveri, following his master's death. The true sons of Lorgar attempted to capture the priest inside. Redsnot pretended to be a ratling, carrying Killiskin's shooter to splatter, tricking the priest, who had really naff eyesight. Pillaging the temple, as Redsnot calmed the priest in low Gothic. Though Redsnot lied to his mates that the priest would lead him to more loot, the Red Gobbo crashed through the stained glass of the Great Angle. Seeing the priest as a tyrant, ruling over his Gretchen mates, he shot him in the chest, his foldable gun catching the eye of Redsnot, who the Gobbo recognized as the smartest of the bunch. Slowing the invasion of the cathedral by melting down candle wax to slow the Umi advance, the Gobbo killed Commissar Marveri, revealing that his Garg shooter injured him with every shot due to the recoil. Passing on the torch to Redsnot, telling him he couldn't refuse once offered the role, Redsnot took the empty gun and probably died sometime after. As Red Gobbo sightings became more regular, loads of orcs crumped them wherever they showed up. The Blood Axe, Stimmer, goring his first Gobbo on a Space Hulk, which they originally thought was infested by skin thieves, but was actually crewed by sneaky grots. The Gobbo known as the Instigator, assuming the title when he shot his master in the face. Before dying, the grot formerly known as Scratches detonated a bunch of munitions within the ship and passed on some kind of Gobbo virus, which the freebooters and Stimmer would pass on. Stimmer years later, becoming a pain boy, succeeding his mentor Vaca when the fishies shot him with their Rayleigh guns. On the world of Coronas 5, Stimmer, having passed on the Gobbo virus, realised the grots were acting too polite, which is well strange for them cheeky gits. The planet plunged into a nuclear winter, caused by the Orc invasion which had killed billions over a month of crumping. 11 days of siege were smashed by the collision of the kill cruiser, the original Big Un. Stimmer's assistant, Goggles, helping him reason that the only way to fix the grots would be to kill a red Gobbo to crush their spirits. With no Gobbo around, Stimmer asked a bunch of odd boys to help make one. First checking in with the freebooter, Say Yes Yag, who taken an unexploded bolt to the head, forcing him to never say no to anything. Yag claiming that it's all in the gear, needed to dress a bunch of grots in red capes and goggles, arming them with weapons. Having killed loads of Gobbos in the past, this idea seemed like a garg one until Gobbos started scrapping with each other, having become tyrannical, now given some Dakka and a position of power. Next checking in with his mate, Shank the Clank, within Mechtown. Stimmer found his workshop besieged by a bunch of orcs, having promised them all a proper speedy war bike, which he never made. Grabbing scrap from outside to help build a red Gobbo, Shank got a bit carried away and made a war bike instead, but after some negotiations, made a killer can called the Red Gobbo 2. Stimmer telling the grot inside to start the revolution of working hard and obeying. When Shank told Stimmer the cost would be 1 billion teeth, the pain boy decided to refuse paying even half and went to find someone else who could make a proper Gobbo. Resorting to speak with his neighbour, Weird Boy Edric, to find a way. As Stimmer sat among a bunch of decapitated Umi Weird Boy heads, a punch from Edric sent him into a trance. Seeing former Gobbos, such as Thingwit, Red Snot, and even seeing through the eyes of the grot of Gorka Morka. Within the sands of the planet, the first Gobbo found a metal boy glyph containing a clan memory of the Wa in Even. Witnessing the origins of the Orc and Grot Orcoids of the past, Stimmer watched as the grot slowly grew smaller, or was Orcs growing bigger. Either way, Stimmer smacked it every time it complained about how it was no longer in charge. Waking up to find Edric being strangled by an headless grot, Stimmer left him to it as he left the tent, finding his war boss Gward as the grots put down all the orcs supported by the Red Gobbo 2 and Say Yes Yag with mufflers covering his ears. Goggles the grot, revealing it all to be a part of his own plans to enact a revolution. Stimmer, before scrapping with the Gobbo, told him he'd lose, to which the Gobbo said they'll lose until the last orc dies, and then they'll win. Stimmer dying, respecting the cunning of Goggles, as the revolution swung into full gear. Another grot would assume the mantle of the Red Gobbo later on, aboard the cruiser, the Big Thumper. The grot called Slipbit, serving the mech boy Zappalax, saved by the Gobbo during a whipping. His expertise were needed to capture the ship, as part of the Caper crew. While orcs are brutal and cunning, grots are sneaky and daring. Their theft of the chopper from Big Knob Head Puncher and Druggen of the Knob Grot Stomper, setting in motion a scrap between the two. Telling the war boss, Ardguts, that the two knobs were plotting to overthrow him, as all three confronted one another in the ship's cargo bay. Slipbit opened the airlock, flushing them into space. All but the Red Gobbo and Slipbit surviving of the Caper crew. The grots captured the Big Thumper, yet as they travelled through the warp, the Gobbo began to become demoralized. Having no way to persecute the orcs for his revolution, Slipbit tried to cheer up the Gobbo, but found them smaller than he'd remembered. Only when they left the warp did he perk up, sensing orcs on the planet of Rostin 5 below. Crash landing on the surface, losing 386 of their crew, the Snakebite warboss, Brucker Bloodspiller, confronted the remaining 30 grots, the Red Gobbo attempting to gore him, only to be cut in half by his chopper, passing the torch to Slipbit. Having never heard of the Red Gobbo, Brucker ordered his tribe to capture the grots. Slipbit, seeing a gap in the squig pens for a potential escape, concocted a plan. Put into a cage until sunrise, as Brucker's men made a fighting pit. The next day, the grots were pitted against those of the Snakebites. Niblet, gored up by the grot Snotter of the snake bites. When Slipbit took his turn, he tried to convince his opponent to join the revolution, but messed it up. Hiding a knife in his boot and a piece of red cloth, Slipbit tried to be the Red Gobbo, though his mates weren't buying it. Though after stabbing the runt-herd grunter in the ear and running into the woods, the grots came around. Sneaking into Brucker's camp and overhearing his plans to escape the planet on the crashed cruiser, the Gobbo, though found by Snotter, wasn't dobbed in as he stole Brucker's shooter and a bunch of stick bombs, leaving the message the Red Gobbo was here. Bloodspiller riding out with his squigogs on his personal mount, Fluffy. The Snakebites was ambushed by the Gretchens within the knock zone, setting off the stick bombs as the Gobbo fell from his tree perch, firing the shooter. The Gobbo's fall tearing off his cape as ropes unmounted the Snakebite riders. Though Brucker lost an eye, he returned to his camp to rally all his men to the scrap. The counterattack, crumping everyone but a handful of grots, all closed ranks calling themselves the Red Gobbo. Bloodspiller took them back to the campsite to settle things within the fighting pit. Taking them on himself until only Slipbit remained, though the cheeky git sliced Brucker up a bit with a knife. A single punch shattered Slipbit's chest, the last thing he ever saw being Snotter, dressed as the Red Gobbo. Red Gobbos springing up all over the place like weeds. If more than one appears at once, the true Gobbo is decided by the Great Squig Race, and no matter how many Red Gobbos there is, they'll never overthrow the Orcs. Whether seen bounding around on his squig, bouncer, wearing commissar hats, red coats, or other weird stuff, at the end of the day, only good Gobbos are dead'n.
Oi, listen to me when I's talking to ya. We's gonna go on their ship. We's gonna smash it up and kill anything that gets in our way. And then we's gonna get back on the boat and go home. That'll show 'em. Do you lot of humies runts understand that? Good. Now with me. Whoa!
Though it is true to say that many of the Xenos of the galaxy are typical in their desires and strategies, there are always outliers. Creatures bereft of the glory of his Imperium, yet adequate in their utility in culling the enemies of his Imperium. Though it cannot be said that the enemy of my enemy is my friend, they are in some instances able to aid humanity, if only for their own selfish gains. As such, today we shall tell the deeds of a greenskin worthy of elucidating, in order to better understand and exploit the weaknesses of his Imperium's enemies, the so-called freebooter, Captain Bloodflag. An Orc pirate that hounded the Imperium during the Third Aurelian Crusade, Captain Bloodflag as a freebooter clan captain would plunder the Aurelia subsector for many years unimpeded until the arrival of the Emperor's Angels, the Bloodravens. A reputedly savage Orc, Bloodflag would be entirely driven by his thirst for plunder in conjunction with his own Orc war. Uncharacteristically for a greenskin, Bloodflag would only engage in battles deemed profitable to pillage. Identified by Inquisitor Adrastia of the Ordo Hereticus as a treacherous mercenary for hire to even the sector's human nobility, Bloodflag would often attempt incredibly risky ventures in order to line his own pockets. Commanding hundreds of Orc crewmen within his gigantic void ship, Kill Cruiser. With the High Lords of Terror's decree to purge the sector via Exterminatus, the Bloodravens would instead resolve to purge the system with Blade and Bolter and safeguard the soon-to-be-conquered planets. With Captain of the Bloodravens' Third Company, Gabriel Angelos, joining forces with Inquisitor Adrastia, the Imperium's warriors would shoot down Bloodflag's vessel, causing it to crash land on the planet of Typhos. Losing many of his crew to the impact, Bloodflag would survive with only 3 other crew members, Mr. Nailbrain, young Master Spookums, and the Stormboy, Brickfist. Assaulted by an Eldar scout party, Bloodflag would conquer small craft-world outposts and reorganize his fragmented forces on his way to confront their leader, Autarch Kavlesh. Defeating the craft-world Alatok Eldar, Bloodflag would slay Caliph Yet in her final moments, the Autarch would convey dark tidings for the subsector and Bloodflag's own fate. Soon after, surrounded by Imperial forces under the command of Inquisitor Adrastea, the two would parlay a deal. Tasking the Orc captain with the deeds of slaying the renegade Bloodraven chaptermaster, Azariah Kyrus, Adrastea would permit the Orcs to face 3 Imperial Guard regiments to earn their glory in combat of an arena of their choosing. However, the deal would be sundered with Bloodflag's insistence that the Inquisitor's hat be added to the bargain. Leaving empty-handed, Adrastea would inform the Orcs that she had been responsible for crashing their ship. Vowing vengeance against the Inquisitor, Bloodflag would warn her that she would soon pay for her actions. With no ship to escape the planet, Bloodflag would assault a traitor guard-held teleporter array within a nearby laden temple ruin, facing a Baneblade super-heavy tank by the name of Beamblade. Thwarting the chaos-corrupted Imperial Guard units, Bloodflag would succeed in escaping Typhos and transport his forces to the Bloodraven recruitment world of Calderis. Finding the chaos-corrupted Astartes, led by Sergeant Lysandros, purging the planet's city capital of Argus, the Orcs would pillage the valuables left in the Astartes' wake. Meshing together vehicles to combat the Chaos Space Marines, the Orcs would crush the Firebase's forces and reap their rewards. Yet before escaping with their ill-gotten gains, they would be confronted by the Orc War, led by war boss Smashface. Forcing the warband into a bottleneck, Bloodflag would decimate Smashface's war and end the war boss's life. With Smashface's remnant army joining Bloodflag's forces, Bloodflag would use the city's teleporters to travel to the Aurelian subsector, former capital world, Aurelia. Assaulted by Chaos Space Marines on the now frozen wasteland, Bloodflag would dismantle and destroy anything within reach before retreating through the teleporters to the Meridian city capital. Facing further renegade Marine forces, Bloodflag would intercept a transmission from the Lord Ascendant of the traitor Marines, Kyrus. Informing Inquisitor Adrastea to prepare for battle, Bloodflag would further plunder Meridian by raiding the hive city of Spire Golgotha, held by the Orc Badmoon's clan. Combating the Orc battle wagon, Daisy, Bloodflag's Lieutenant Mr. Nailbrain would salvage the massive vehicle and move onward to face their charge on the planet of Typhon, Azariah Kyrus. Finding what appeared to be the corrupted chaptermaster, Kyrus would be revealed as an illusion cast by the Eldar Alatok Seer Council. Combating the Craftworld Eldar once more, the Orcs would be victorious, yet with the destruction of the Seer Council, they would in turn doom Typhos to destruction. It is here that Kyrus would reveal himself. Applauding the Orc captain for aiding his own plans in slaying the Seer Council, Kyrus would inform Bloodflag of the arrival of the Imperium's Exterminatus fleet and depart the planet. Knowing his Orc War would be destroyed should they linger, Bloodflag would order his forces to retreat. Fighting through hordes of demons, feral Tyranids, Orcs, Chaos Space Marines, and their champion, Bloodflag would finally escape Typhos's destruction into the unknown. Materializing on the Space Hulk, Judgment of Carrion, Bloodflag would see to the colossal conglomeration of ships and turn it into a new kill cruiser. Slaying the Space Hulk's denizens of Tyranids and rival Orcs, Bloodflag would plan his next course of action with the Space Hulk now in his possession. Deducing Kyrus to be located on the exterminated planet of Cyrene, Bloodflag would venture to the desolate world and confront the chaos-corrupted forces. Destroying a large contingent of his forces, Kyrus would nonetheless ascend to the form of a demon prince of the ruinous powers. Seeking to sacrifice the Aurelian sector to the blood god, Khorne, Bloodflag would aid Captain Gabriel Angelos and his Bloodravens in attempting to thwart Kyrus. Though weakening the demon prince, Angelos would be wounded and his forces broken. Bloodflag and his forces would incapacitate the demon prince and bring down a rock barrage loaded with explosives to destroy Kyrus. With the Aurelia subsector saved from the clutches of the ruinous powers, Bloodflag would see to one last grudge, Inquisitor Adrastea. Confronting Adrastea, Bloodflag would overpower the Inquisitor and steal her hat. Content with his plunder, Bloodflag would leave the Aurelia subsector and pillage the galaxy aboard the reforged flagship, Kill Cruiser, seeking their next spoils of war, bloodshed, and raiding.
Them Inquisition Yumis can't be trusted any further than they can be thrown, which in that one's case might be a bad example.
Snikrot is a commando boss who served the war boss Kilskar. Serving as Kilskar's personal assassin, who fought the Kati-chan Umis on the mining world of Dulmalin, some git called Iron Hand Strachan had a scrap with him, kicking him off a building. Gaining the notice of the Prophet of Gork and Mork, Gazgul Mag Uruk Fraka, during the Second War for Armageddon, Snikrot infiltrated the Cerberus base of the Umis, surviving within the equatorial jungles, goring up a bunch of the Orc hunters until they started calling him the Stalker. Snikrot used his own complexion to blend into the plant life, using only the bare minimum of stuff, like his knives which he calls Mork's teeth. Rucking hundreds of Umis as he gobbed on the dangerous nosh of the jungle, Snikrot snicked the Umis of Cerberus base, pulling out their eyes and scalping any git who came across his path. His men called the Red Skulls as a reminder of their scalping. When Gaz returned to Armageddon for another go 50 years later, Snikrot rejoined his master, having earned a reputation as the morkiest of all commandos. Hoping to go back to Armageddon someday to continue his hunt of the Humes, every runt of the planet cries themselves to sleep thinking about the ghost who lurks in the jungles.
Mosrog Scragbad is a beast boss of the Snakebites. A strange war boss who prefers to hang around with squigs rather than his own kin. Legend says he grew up in exile hunting massive beasts, making him a master at tracking and ambushes. Joining the War of War boss, Gobgrinder, joined the invasion of Irwin II by the Iron Warriors. Mosgrod was swallowed by a massive thing called a Gutmaw, losing his trusty steed to its guts. Clawing himself free from its insides as he was slowly digested, he cut out the beast's eyes and dragged them back to his boys, earning him the respect of Gobgrinder. His pain boys replacing his limb with the Power Claw, Gut Ripper, named after his survival inside the Gutmaw. Many say Mosrog can't be killed, as he hunts ever bigger gits to prove his orkiness, with some stupid orcs reckoning he'll hunt down the stars when nothing else is left to kill. Warbands hearing of his stories, seeking him out to join his tribal warriors. Mosrog tolerates his newfound tribe, despite still preferring squigs. Oh, that reminds me. He also got this big albino squig called Big Chomper. Its name is the Bad Beast of Scrapmud, an eater of Warboss Norbag's buggy, untamable by any orc save for Mosrog. Said to submit to the snakebite upon a single glare from his eyes. In reality, the Great White Squig took 3 days of chasing, wrestling, and even the occasional slap to bring it to heel. Inseparable ever since, much to the relief of everyone involved, now not having to worry about the carnage which would happen if they left either unattended. Maybe one day, Mosrog will find a beast so big, even he can't kill it. But until then, you can guarantee he's gonna make a great scrap along the way.
Zodgrod Wartsnacker is an orc runtard serving Ugalard Duff Grunters. A zogging weird snakebite in charge of his tribe Snotlings. His Gretchens were so good at fighting, they started getting called Commando Runts, cause they listened to orders well gog. Kicked out of his tribe's charges for being too protective of his Snotlings, after firing a mech from one of his shock attack guns for mistreating a Gretchen, who was meant to be fired from it in the first place. Ugalard banished him for nearly throwing to Daka. Forming a freebooter clan with his Gretchen, selling his skills as a runtard to the boss with the most teeth. After many wars, Zodgrod found some writings written by a legendary runtard called Narflung, who used to experiment on the Gretchens. Making his Gretchens more orky, following Narflung's instructions to make super runts from now on. His use of ringing bells for treats of plump, juicy squig meat as rewards was well Gog. Selling off his super runs to orc tribes, despite many saying Fearless Gretchen is a bit too orky. Though many say these snots could be a problem, doesn't stop Zogrod getting tons of teeth to line his pockets. To any war boss who doesn't laugh his guts out at the idea of employing Gretchen for a real scrap, they find out they're well Gog for the amount of teeth they pay. Zogrod is continuing making new super runs in order to make his designs better.
Tusker Demon Killer was one of the orkiest bosses ever. Known as a Garg of a Demon Killer, Tusker always did Daka against gits what was more unky than him. He had this cruiser, Gorejaw, what he used to blitz the Immaterium, and Tusker gored loads of tough demons. Invading the Eye of Terror, Tusker's cruiser landed on this demony slag with a mega Garg demon called the Blood Prince. Using his power claw, Tusker killed the Blood Prince but died after being gored up by an herd of scum. Thing is, the Garg called Khorne was mega impressed with all the Daka Tusker did, so he resurrected Tusker and his boys to fight again the next day. For days, Tusker and his boys would Daka the demons like proper orcs, and the Blood Garg was mega happy with them. So happy, he made it so Tusker now lives in the Immaterium with Khorne. There's a place called the Brass Citadel, where Khorne keeps his generals to fight Tusker every day and kill him. Don't matter though, Tusker loves Daka, and so does his boys, so for them, they get to do Daka every day, forever. Which is pretty much the most orky thing in the universe.
Old Zogwart is a weird boy who owns the stars as a freebooter. Born during the total eclipse of the sun of Kati-chan, this git was born fighting the moment he left his cocoon, having matured within a nest of blood vipers. Already infected with loads of snake bites as an infant, clawing his way from the ground. In each hand, he held a blood viper, having gored him with his teeth, even as venom coursed through his veins. Favoured by Gork and Mork for all his tribe to see, ever since, no serpent dares attack him and instead wriggles across his body, sleeping in his furs when night falls, allowing him to coat his weapons with poison. His fangs now able to spill toxins as a result of his birth. This champion of Mork rose within a single year to among the most respected knobs of his clan, but even then didn't show off how Garg he was with magic. Manifesting weird boy talents such as shooting lightning from his eyes and stuff. Even though the snakebite elders put massive orcs to mind him, many started to turn into squigs overnight, calling it Old Zogwart's curse. Setting on Yumis of Kati-chan's militia, Zogwart let out the great green within him, blasting energies what disintegrated any git who was stupid enough to not move out the way, leaving nothing but squigs covered in Umi clothing. Burning out his own eyes by accident as his weird blew up an entire Umi company in a single blast. As he began to mature, he became more famous than even his war boss, leaving Kati-chan behind, taking his squigs with him. Seeking out bigger wars so he can try out ever more Garg weird stuff. This freebooter lets his temporary war bosses steal all the glory, lording over gits who are turned into squigs, so long as he gains more power over the Great Green.
Orchimedes is a mech boy who serves Gazgul Mag Uruk-Raka. Probably the smartest orc that ever lived, this odd boy developed the teleporter technologies used during the Third War for Armageddon, among other weird stuff. Many speculating he's not even a real orc, but rather an idea of what an orc mech is as a symbol. I don't know what that means, because it's stupid and either he's a thing or he's not. Developing enormous great gargants, heavily armed submarines, and other bits to help Gaz's war to claim Armageddon. Apparently, the Officio Assassinorum have been hunting him for years, but never actually got him. His war machines outgunning even those massive Umi titans, baffling their princess. Whether he's real or not, I bet he's well chuffed with the havoc he's caused,
making life a right pain in the arse for the homies. Buzgob is a mech boss who served the War of Garagak, the right hand of the Overfiend of Talarax, making Weird Daka to grow his clan's strength. This odd boy set up a workshop complex on the world of Castoral Novum to make even more Daka. Combating the Raven Guard Beakies and Elysium Plot Troopers who attempted to break all of his stuff, the homies failed to assassinate Buzgob, allowing him to keep building. Creating Death Dreads, Mega Dreads, Killer Cans, and his own custom stompers called Buzgob's Dreadheads, the Forsar sector continues to be ravaged by the War of Garagak, with his mech boss by his side. This has been the tale of the Greenskins, read by the Rememberer. Being green is well garg, innit? Plus if you're not green, you're stupid, and you need to get crumped. How long do these bits go on for, eh? You should zog off and get garged like me. Why are you still here? That's all I gotta say. I told you to zog off.